Welcome back to the Rodcast. It is a Monday fun day edition of the Rodcast, and we are jam-packed. Congrats, Cowboys fans. A hell of a win for the Dallas Cowboys on the road versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, even though we all had to stay up a little too late to watch it. We'll get into that. Also, Texans with a big win over the Buffalo Bills, asserting themselves in the AFC. We'll get into that and talk about that coming up on the show. It is Texas OU week, which means it's 6:04 and OU still sucks. So we'll dive into some Texas OU discussion. We'll go behind the burnt orange curtain next segment. One of the wildest days in the history of college football this past weekend on Saturday. You had number 1, number 4, 9, 10, 11 all fall down, all go down this past weekend. Upsets all over the place. So we'll dive into it. We'll talk about it. And the Longhorns, of course, number 1 in the land because of all the upsets, including number 1 going down over the weekend. We'll discuss it. We'll talk about it. All your usual favorites, of course. We'll dive into who said that off the record, what the facts, what the stats. We also have the topic for the big fat poll of the day. And of course, we have Raj Rant coming up a little bit later on in the show. But before we do any of that, let's introduce you to the rest of the crew. He's one of the hardest working members of the ARN family. Got a hustler spirit, period. Not sure what he's paid, but pretty damn sure the man is underpaid. Ain't no 401k for this hustler, and he's a hustle man of many talents. It is our friend, co-host, and neighbor. It is Patrick Davis, y'all. What's going on, Patrick? How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. Ready to go on a Monday morning. We got, if you could believe it, 2 more fire alarm drills this morning since I've been here.
What? Come on, man. They just did that last week. I thought it was a monthly thing. Like, once a month.
I will tell you this, Rod. If this building ever does catch on fire, I'm going down with it because they do these things like 3 times a week.
And I'm serious, like, what is happening? It's crazy.
You know, if you stay up late watching, let's say, a Cowboys game that started way too late, then you wake up in the morning and you drive to work, and then they blare a fire alarm at you twice this morning. Twice.
I can't believe it.
They blare a fire alarm at you. It is a fun way to wake up on a Monday morning.
Wow.
But I will take the fire alarm over what is now the most annoying thing I found in college football, which is the cover rendition of Running Down a Dream they play on the SEC network.
I don't even know if I'm familiar with this. This is
so they play it all the time. It's apparently like the SEC network theme for the year.
Oh, I didn't. Okay.
And so I believe it was.
I probably have heard it and is paying no attention to it at all.
So I believe in the Texas Mississippi State game was when I first saw it, and they played it, I don't know, what felt like 1,000,000 times during the game. And they just play pieces of it during the game. But the problem with it is the song itself with Tom Petty's version. Great song. They don't change anything. They just basically re-recorded it with, I believe, Luke Combs.
Okay, I got you. Okay,
so it's just a slightly worse version of the song. And they play it all the time. You're like, why would you play it? And then I was like, then we tried to go deeper into it. And we're like, but Tom Petty's from Florida. Florida is SEC country. Why would you play it? Luke Combs is from North Carolina. He's not even from SEC country.
See, y'all tried to think about it. Tried to add
logic,
reason into this thing.
It is
like, no, there's no.
The most infuriating song.
It's just random.
Just to play it over and over again. Where you're like, I like the song, but when it's the Tom Petty version, and then there's this weird cover version that is nonstop played on the SEC network.
Change it to make it like a football song, like they do some of the other songs?
No,
like
it's basically
SEC related song.
No, they didn't change it at all. It's just re-recorded and slightly different, but not better. There's nothing that, and I wouldn't say it's really even that much worse. It's just not better. So why re-record it with a different person?
Why not just do the original? Don't just do the original.
Yeah,
maybe because they didn't have to pay as much money. Maybe could you pay less money for the rights of the cover version?
I don't know. Tom Petty's dead. I don't think it can be that. Like,
I just said I don't know. I'm just saying maybe there's something with that and the money. I have no idea. That's a great point. I
don't know, but it is so annoying because it is constant. Because it's like they play it coming out of commercial breaks, they play it in commercial breaks, they play it going into commercial breaks. They play it so much during an SEC game. And the last couple of weeks, I've watched on the SEC network because it was Texas Mississippi State was on there.
Yep.
And then Alabama Vanderbilt was on there.
Yeah.
So I've been watching the SEC network and dealing with
apparently.
The most annoying. It is infuriating. I was so over it last weekend, and forgot about it completely. And this weekend, the first time it played, it was like finding a splinter that you forgot you had in your hand or something, and you're just like, oh, I forgot this was the thing. Oh, it is so frustrating.
I can tell you're very frustrated by it.
So, SEC Network, I know you paid for this and it was supposed to be all season long. Please do not keep that all season. We're in week 2 of SEC play for Texas, and I am by far done with it.
Annoyed by it.
And there's so many more weeks of college football left.
Yeah, you got a long time, man. You might need to build up some type of tolerance to it.
I'll say this: I'm glad we're number 1 and probably won't be on SEC Network as much. So that is a positive. That hopefully we won't have to be on there as much, and I can not have to watch as much SEC Network. Let me tell you, introducing my co-host, though, he is a proud alumni of DBU. He's got more papers than Dunder Mifflin and watches more film than Siskel and Ebert. He is a new Rod father of Austin Sports Radio and celebrated a birthday yesterday. Happy birthday to Mr. Rod Babers.
I appreciate the intro, and thank you for the birthday wishes, and thanks to from the crowd out there, from folks listening. I appreciate all the love and birthday wishes over the weekend. Got some of those via social media, so thank you there. Also, speaking of social media, we'll get the topic for the Big Fat Poll today. That'll be coming up later on in the show at the end of this hour. We'll also dive into some Texas OU discussion, and yes, we'll talk about the crazy weekend that happened with college football. One of the wildest weekends probably that I've ever witnessed in college football. Seeing that many big dogs go down to unranked teams, by the way. It'd be different if you saw some of the ranked teams go down.
Yeah, this was
other ranked teams.
This was supposed to be a boring weekend of football, right?
Yes,
this was supposed to. There was one matchup of top 25 teams, and even A&M wasn't on both top 25s.
Yeah, and it was number 25 actually. Speaking of the ranked matchups, they were and they actually beat the you know what out of Missouri. I mean, that was an Old Testament style butt whipping. Every time, like I said, I should have picked against the Aggies. I didn't. I picked Missouri. I said when I pick the Aggies, it always blows up in my face. I should have picked them, so it would have blown up in my face, but I didn't. And the Aggies, they look good. By the way, we'll talk about the Aggies a little bit because right now the Aggies undefeated in SEC play.
Yes, one of 3 teams.
They are the leaders. They are right now leaders. They control their own fate right now in the SEC.
No,
there's a really good chance that if the Aggies are if they have a successful run here, like through the rest of SEC play, and Texas continues to do what they've done all season, an SEC title game between Texas and Texas A&M is not out of the realm.
It's not
at all. Matter of fact, it's looking more and more realistic by the day.
Now we have to look at what those tiebreakers are.
You got to look at the tiebreakers and all that kind of stuff. But the Aggies control their fate, so it's no tiebreakers with them. They control their fate right now. Like they're undefeated in SEC play.
They are. Do they play LSU?
Yeah. As I said, LSU's not a world beater right now.
No. I was just saying because LSU, Texas, and A&M are the only teams without a loss right now.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Like the Aggies, strangely enough, they control their fate. If they just keep on winning, the Aggies will be in the SEC title game. Longhorns keep winning. I mean, so I don't know how it works if they beat them like that, but they control their fate. My point is that.
Yes.
Going forward. But anyway, we'll get into it. We'll talk about all that. We'll also get into some NFL discussion. Got to talk about the Cowboys last night. So we'll start there with the Cowboys win over the Steelers. And I think that was a big win for the Cowboys. Took a lot of grit because they needed to win that game. No Micah, no DeMarcus Lawrence. Of course, you lost Marsha Nealon actually early in that game too. So you were down to your fifth and sixth DNs with pretty much Tyrus Wheat, Chauncey Golson, and Carl Lawson because you remember you lost Sam Williams early in the season. No DeRon Bland, Kalen Carson didn't play. You end up losing Zach Martin at one point in that game. Tyler Guyton left, and he was seen with a wrap on his leg later on after the game. I mean, there were tons of guys just going down like flies for the Cowboys. They were a mass unit going up against the Steelers, still found a way to win that game and didn't play a great game. It was ugly in a lot of ways. You had Dak with the turnovers and interceptions, especially in the red zone, him and CD not on the same page. You did have, of course, the field goal that was blocked. You had, there was a lot of reasons for the Cowboys, a lot of excuses for the Cowboys to lose that game, and they did not allow that to happen. They found a way to win that game late in the clutch. Give Dak some props. You saw some of that big Dak energy later on in the game, and the Cowboys defense continued to show up. Now it's not a high-powered offense they were facing with Justin Fields and the Pittsburgh Steelers. They still found a way to limit Justin Fields and to limit that Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Rico Dowdle had a career game. Jalen Tolbert had a career game. We talked about the other guys that needed to step up for the Cowboys. They certainly did. Tolbert with that game-winning touchdown. And probably the most, I would say, extraordinary thing about this effort for the Cowboys, and we'll dive into it because there are so many different angles that we could get into. The quote from Tyler Smith, and I've been looking for the audio and I can't find it, so I'm saddened about it. I know it's out there somewhere, so we'll do our best to try to scrounge it up. But the game-winning touchdown from Dak Prescott to Jalen Tolbert, Tyler Smith said later, this is why it was so remarkable. Not only because it was the game winner and the go-ahead touchdown for him. He said, bro, it was miraculous. I mean, JT literally sprained his effing nuts. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. Sprained his nuts the play before. Comes back, makes the game winner. Unbelievable. If you were watching the game, you do remember the play where Jalen Tolbert goes down. It was a target to him in the back of the end zone, and he goes down. I don't know what happened, if the ball hit him or we have no idea. But basically, Tyler Smith is saying that he had a testicular contusion, I believe is the medical term for it. But you can say that he sprained his junk, whatever. But he had a testicular contusion and still came back into the game and was able to catch the game winner and have his career game, his best game of his career, 7 receptions, 87 yards, 40% of the team air yards for the Cowboys, and did it all. Obviously in a big game for the Cowboys on the road, and then end up catching the game winner with a testicular contusion to boot, while catching the game-winning touchdown. Well done, sir. Show a lot of testicular fortitude for the Dallas Cowboys. That play symbolized it in a nutshell. Oh, that's not what I meant. The microcosm, basically, of the Cowboys game was, I think, encapsulated in those couple of plays there at the end by the grit and the fortitude, testicular fortitude of one Jalen Tolbert. So
no, I mean, there was a lot of players who had, Rico Dowdle, that was his best game as a Cowboy, or best game in the NFL. You had a lot of guys had to step up. We know that defensive line is just decimated at this point, yet they still played well. Was able to hold this Steelers team. It was a gutsy effort from basically everybody on that Cowboys team to not really play great football, but play good enough football to get a win, which is all you can ask for when you were just really, really beat up as a team. To get a win this week was big for them.
Yeah, and they need it because they got a tough stretch coming up. I believe Detroit is next for the Cowboys. Detroit is red hot and looks really good, especially that offense. And I don't know if the Cowboys are going to get all these guys back, or even a lot of these guys back for that Detroit game. But you got it. I mean, that was a gutsy performance by the Cowboys. A lot of reasons to lose that game. And I thought at one point, I was like, man, the Cowboys going to find a way to lose this damn game.
When Marshawn Nealon went down so early in the game too, you're like, man, you had one guy left. You had one guy left, and he, on the defensive edges, and and they still were able to come out there and get it done.
They got it done. And how about this? Even without Michael Parsons, no DeMarcus Lawrence, no Marshawn Nealon, for most of that game, and then we know Sam Williams has been out the entire season. Cowboys still had a higher pressure rate than the Steelers did in that game. The guys that came, the guys that had to play, the guys that need to step up, they really did a good job. I mean, you got to play a whole lot better if you're going to beat a team like Detroit next week. But you got to give the Cowboys a ton of props. And Dak had to play hero ball, and it did not look pretty all the time. It was the best of times and the worst of times for Dak. But I think Dak really, he came up with the game-winning go-ahead touchdown when they needed it. So that's all you can really ask from Dak. On the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers, a lot of stuff going against you, including a ton of injuries. I thought Dak played pretty well because and I said this last week, you had to give more touches in your running back committee to Rico Dowdle. You just had to. It was your best option. You were at the best bad option. And they did. They gave him 20. He had 20 rushes. He had 87 yards. He wasn't, spectacular running the football, but he did give you a presence in the running game. And he ended up with 2 receptions for 27 yards. So actually over 100 all-purpose yards and that touchdown, the first touchdown on the board for the Cowboys. It seemed like giving Rico Dowdle more responsibility in that committee of running backs is the way to go. That's what I thought last week when I said it, and I think that paid off for the Cowboys offense. It's like I said, he's not an elite running back by any stretch, but he's definitely the best running back you got.
Well, and first of all, Deuce Vaughn was not even active for the game. I don't know why he wasn't. I don't know if it was they needed more players on defense or they needed somebody else in the wide receiver core. I don't know where it was that they needed somebody else, but he wasn't active, or if he was hurt, he wasn't active. We know Zeke was showing signs that he was in a lot of pain before the game. He was kind of questionable this week, going through some injuries. So this was Rico Dowdle was going to get the ball whether they wanted to give it to him or not. He was going to get more, but he did. He got a couple carries over 10 yards. We made referencing that. They didn't have 10-yard carry over 10 yards from a running back. Yeah, I believe he got a 12-yarder and a 13-yarder in the game. So a couple of runs where he was able to go ahead and pick up a first down on one run. But yeah, I think, you're still not 100% there, but it was a big improvement to see Rico Dowdle in there, to see Jalen Tolbert step up. And, Mike Tomlin talked before the game. He's like, CeeDee Lamb's the offense. We know CeeDee Lamb's the offense. So we're just going to key in on CeeDee Lamb. And even that, he still got 5 receptions for 62 yards. He was still able to make some catches. Some of those were really, really impressive catches too. But Ferguson stepped up. Jalen Tolbert stepped up. You saw the rest of the team. And that's including a team that had to go back to the locker room and wait and now 90 minutes before playing a game. So, for a lot of guys playing in the biggest game of their career, because it's a real opportunity for them to be able to try and get up for it and get ready to play in that big moment, then have to go wait, then come back out, warm up again, and go out there and perform like that. It was really impressive. It was great to see. I mean, I heard they gave the game ball to Mike McCarthy after the game. You have to give some credit for this coaching staff, to everyone on it, to get the guys ready to go and to play. I mean, all around, it was one of those games that if the Cowboys lose, nobody would have blamed them, right? You would have gone.
Yeah, because they have a lot of excuses. There were a lot of reasons.
You're
like, that's why they lost.
You lost. It was injuries and that, and they didn't take that L. Those are big when you talk about trying to compete down to the end of the season and trying to get in the playoffs and get the wins. The wins like this are huge. It was just you hung in there long enough, and at the end, Dak was able to get it done. Jalen Tolbert was able to get it done, and a really impressive win for a Cowboys team that had every reason to mail it in and showed some heart.
Yep, I agree. I was very impressed with the grit of that group. Period. Because as I said, and I even think about the weather delay, but you're right. That even though we were all annoyed by it, I think about how tough it is for those guys to get focused again. And it is much easier, I imagine, for the Steelers to deal with that, considering they were at home, Cowboys on the road. But Cowboys look great. It's 3rd and 4th down. They were really good. They were 10 of 16 on 3rd and 4th down. Even though they really couldn't, they weren't a dominant running team, but man, they put the ball in Dak's hands, and Dak really just found a way over and over again to move that Cowboys offense. Ended up with over 350 yards passing. He did have the 2 interceptions, but I think one of those was just him, and the red zone one was crucial. Him and CD just not on the same page. That's rare, and they talked about it on the broadcast. I'm not sure what that was about, but Dak doesn't make reads that bad.
Yeah,
that's so that was his. He expected CD to be there. CD was on a different page. Not sure what happened there, but Dak was spectacular, concluding the game-winning drive at the end there. So Cowboys pull out that was a tough win for them, and I might have been one of the more impressive wins that we've seen in a long time, considering the circumstances and everything working against them. And I like that now at least now you know who your number 3 receiver is. Right, in terms of the receiving core, Jake Ferguson's probably your number 3 receiver in terms of passing game, but at least Jalen Tolbert stepped up for you, and now you know, okay, well, Jalen Tolbert, when Brandon Cooks come back, we got our top 3 receivers. You know who your lead running back in your committee is because he stepped up, and I like that they intentionally wanted to. You can tell they intentionally wanted to deliberately showcase some of the other guys early on in the first 3 drives. Kevontae Turpin got a lot of touches. He got 3 touches, I think, on the first 3 drives. Jalen Tolbert, Jalen Brooks was involved early on. Like the opening script, which is usually like 20, something plays. For Sark, it's like 40, which is crazy. But it's like 20 plays. You can tell Mike McCarthy wanted the Steelers to have to acknowledge and respect some of the other weapons. Yes, CD still got his. Matter of fact, CD, I want to say he got most of his touches in the first half. In the second half, I don't know if the Steelers decided to just take him away, or if Dak was, a little frustrated with CD. But I don't know if CD got he didn't get his first pass of the second half till there were like 3 minutes left in regulation. Now, if you don't think about it, it was a wow into that second half.
I mean, I think that might be partly of them just basically seeing what the plan is. They're going to double CD a bunch. Let's go try and figure, we feel we have some guys. If we can get it over to Tolbert and Ferguson, maybe they'll stop doubling CD and then we can get it to them late. But we just got to try and throw it to someone else. If they're doubling one guy, we can get it to somebody else, and it's working. And it did work. And that was, you're trying to force it in. That's kind of what we thought was going to be the problem for the Cowboys in this game, was that they were going to have to force it in to CeeDee Lamb all game. In the second half, where their offense looked a little bit better than it did in the first half, they didn't have to.
Yeah, because other guys stepped up and played well for the Dallas Cowboys, and including Tolbert and Rico Dowdle having their career game. So Cowboys with a big win on the road versus the Steelers. We'll also talk about the Texans, who were at home, but they got a big win over the Buffalo Bills. Defense stepped up for them too, and of course, C.J. Stroud looked like C.J. Stroud. We'll get into that too, but we'll also get into some of the college football action over the weekend, and it was a wild college football weekend, one of the craziest and upset heaviest weekends that we've seen in a long time. But first, we haven't hit the horn headlines, so first let's get educated, updated, and informed on all the top stories today with Patrick Davis and the horn headlines.
All right, your horn headlines brought to you by Top Gun Rentals and Lawn Equipment. In the MLB playoffs, the divisional round began Saturday with all four series. The Guardians got a 7-0 victory over the Tigers, putting up 5 runs in the first. The Yankees rallied to beat the Royals 6-5. While in the NL both series are even at 1-1 after the Phillies beat the Mets on Sunday, and the Padres got a big 10-2 win over the Dodgers. The AL will start their game 2s today. In the NBA, all 3 Texas teams begin their preseason this evening, with the Rockets taking on the Jazz, the Mavericks facing the Grizzlies, and the Spurs going up against the Thunder. The regular season starts in 2 weeks on October 22nd. In college football, 6 top 25 teams were upset this weekend, including 4 in the top 10. Alabama, Tennessee, Missouri, Michigan, USC, and Louisville all lost, with Miami needing last-second heroics from Cam Ward once again to avoid an upset in their game against Cal. After the weekend, Texas regained the number 1 ranking heading into the Red River rivalry. And in the NFL, the Texans' Kaimi Fairbairn hit a 59-yard field goal as time expired to get a 23-20 win over the Bills, while the Cowboys toughed out a 20-17 win over the Steelers on Sunday Night Football. In injury-depleted Cowboys defense tonight got worse when rookie Marshawn Nealon injured his knee and had to be carted off, but the team responded, limiting the Steelers to only 226 yards. Tonight, the Chiefs look to remain undefeated against the Saints, and that is your horn headlines.
All right, Patrick, thank you for the horn headlines. Over the weekend, shocked would be an understatement that you watched Alabama lose to Vanderbilt. Their first time in the program's history taking down a number 1 team. Number 4 Tennessee loses to Arkansas. That one, I don't say we saw it coming, but I did say it was a trap game for Tennessee. It had trap game written all over it for Tennessee. And we didn't know how good Arkansas was, because Arkansas had a loss to Oklahoma State in overtime. And then they had that that one, basically it was I think it was just a 4 or 5 point loss to the Aggies actually too. Either way, the 1-score loss to the Aggies, I should say. Yeah. And I thought, man, Arkansas may be a little tough. Didn't think that they would pull the upset over Tennessee, but I thought they'd make it interesting, and they did more than that, even with a backup quarterback in there, because their quarterback, Taylor Green, got injured. I believe Sam Pittman said he could have gone back out there, but they didn't want to risk it. So even with the backup, they still pulled the upset. The Arkansas defense played really good, and man, the Aggies just whipped Missouri. I mean, they just put an Old Testament style butt whipping on them. Technically, the Aggies were ranked, so they wasn't to an unranked team. And then, of course, you had Michigan lose to Washington, USC lost to Minnesota, and then you had Louisville, the 22 lose to SMU over the weekend. And honestly, in the SEC, the thing that stands out for Texas it's like they have this old saying about film, like watching film on yourself or watching film on the team. Period. It's never as good as you think. It's never as bad as you think. I think you can say that about the SEC in a nutshell right now. Like all the teams that we thought were going to be really good, they're not as good as you think. And other teams we thought were going to be really bad, they're not as bad as you think.
Yeah.
So I think ultimately it'll equal out in terms of the competition level for Texas. But, Georgia and Alabama are just not as good as you thought. Hell, even Tennessee, we thought they were good. Ole Miss.
Yep.
Right? Thought these teams were going to be dominant. They're not as good as you thought. I'm not saying they're bad teams at all. They're not at all. But they're just not as good as you thought. And Vanderbilt, Arkansas, help some of y'all with A&M, because we talked about A&M a lot in the offseason, like that. If you go look at the different possible outcomes, the range of outcomes for the Aggies, like it was all over the place. Some people thought the Aggies were going to be really bad and not even make a bowl game and struggle to make a bowl game. Some people thought, hey man, the Aggies could end up competing to go to the SEC title game. Right now, I'm still not sure where we are with the Aggies. And Connor Wigman coming back, and we talked about his potential and upside. He's only flashed it, but you saw a flash versus Missouri. That might be the best flash he's had, honestly, as a starting quarterback. I'm not sure he's flashed better than.
No, I don't think so. But it's the kind. He's one of those guys who you go, okay, do that next week.
Do it. Do it
2 weeks, 3 weeks in a row. Like if you do that, then we'll all
and don't get hurt. And don't get hurt.
We'll all eat a crow if you go and do that. But until you do. This has kind of been your MO, is that you flash. Everyone thinks oh man, Connor Wegman could be the answer. And then the next week you come out flat. And
or he gets hurt next week.
He gets hurt. And it's just,
yeah.
And so it's like if you can show it, but yeah, he did part one. A lot of people can't do part one. So
like I said, that's the first time I think he's flashed in conference play like that, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Usually because he plays early on the season, usually it's like non-con, and then he ends up getting hurt. So maybe that's the best he's looked, I should say, so far in conference play. But if Connor Wigman plays like he did in that game, what was he, 18 for 22, 276 yards, something like that. If he plays like that for the Aggies and continues to get better week by week, the Aggies could be a problem. For the Aggies defense, we knew that was going to be legit. And remember, that's a brand new offense they're in too, right? So they got a new offense, and maybe the belief is, optimistically, you're looking at glass half full with the Aggies, that they're going to get better in that offense as they become more and more, acquainted with it and more familiar with it, and that Connor Wigman's a better fit for the offense too overall. But the Aggies, man, the Aggies had 6 sacks in that game and averaged over 6.5 yards per carry. Right, the Aggies look good, and also not only, I think the teams that we assumed would be bad teams, or some of the bottom dwellers in the SEC, are better than anticipated, and some of the top dogs aren't as formidable as we anticipated. But also, Texas got to go on a lot of these upsets were pulled at home for these underdog teams, and Texas has to go to those places.
Yep.
Right, we assumed, going to Vanderbilt, it's gonna be nothing. Right. Yeah. Even Nick Saban said, "Oh man, they trolled." It was a masterful trolling of Nick Saban as Vanderbilt rushed the field after beating Bama, their first win over a number 1 ranked team in the program's history. Remember during the offseason, and we'll play this later, Nick Saban kept saying, "Oh, there's only one easy place to play in the SEC. Everywhere else is a tough place to play." He said, "There's only one place that's easy to play, basically, and that's Vanderbilt." I'm paraphrasing. We'll play it for you, but that was what he was saying, and they played that on a loop as they rushed the field against Alabama. Oh, so sweet. But Nick Saban was like, hey, it ain't me. I wasn't there. But still, it was, I think, perfectly and Shakespeareanly ironic that they were able to do that. Anyway, but Vanderbilt got to go to Vandy. And they beat Bama. Vanderbilt believes they can beat Texas. Period.
Yeah.
That's just reality. They just beat Bama, the number 1 team in the country. Whether it's true or not, they're going to believe they can beat Texas. So they're going to come in there trying to pull another upset.
No, I think there's one team left on the schedule who doesn't think they can beat Texas. There's one. Florida. I think Florida's the only team left on this schedule.
And the irony of that is Florida's probably one of the more talented teams. They're one of the most talented teams left on your schedule in terms of overall talent. Maybe
they're the only one without a big win, right?
Yeah, it's basically the Sooners, the obviously the Bulldogs, right? The Aggies are a really talented team too, but Florida's right in there. Florida's like the 4th on your schedule. Florida's probably the 5th most talented team you were going to face all year long, behind Michigan, Georgia, Sooners, the Aggies, and then there's Florida. And like you said, they don't believe they can beat it, but we don't know what their state of mind is going to be by the time they play
That's
Texas.
true.
To your point, they could be. We don't know what they're playing for at that point.
Yeah.
Right? Are they playing for their coach's job? Are they playing for a bowl game? Or are they out of it completely? Have they been just whipped by that schedule of theirs? But you might be right about that. Georgia may be Florida may be the only team that doesn't believe they can beat Texas. But everybody, Vanderbilt now believes it. After Arkansas, we talked about them, right? They hate Texas more than they love themselves, and it works for them because every time they play Texas, they seem to play at a higher level. Their talent level to me increases, and now because they're more talented Texas, because they're playing with this emotional charge and on this emotional high, and that you got to go to Arkansas. Last time Texas went to Arkansas, it wasn't great, and then of course the Aggies, who had one of their most impressive wins that we've seen from them in actually years. A complete win over a top 10 ranked Missouri team at home. And when we talked about traveling to your rivals, Texas hadn't had to do that in recent years. Didn't have, I mean, they did it versus Arkansas, but not in a conference situation. Texas OU is always at a neutral site. That's always the Texas State Fair street fight, as my man Craig Way came to call it. Right, that's what it has been. That's where obviously it's a very unique environment. It's tough to play. I'm not saying it's not a tough, hostile environment, but going to your rivals to play your rivals at their place is different. And now these rivals are probably as confident as they've been maybe ever playing you, considering some of the big wins that they just had in their program's history. So that's a concern, but it's something to keep in mind if you're a Longhorn fan. You're number one in the country, so no need to stress about anything, because the Longhorns, I think, can beat anybody. But now those teams believe they can beat you, which I don't know if they believed that before last weekend. Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt was impressive. I mean, they had over 40 minutes of time of possession. That's how they beat Bama.
Yeah.
They just kept the football away from them. They just played keep away.
No, I mean, I think that game plan, that Mississippi State game plan is spread far and wide of if you don't give them the ball, they can't score on you.
How can they beat you? I mean, yeah. And I'm telling you, I think Oklahoma's going to take that game plan.
Yeah.
And Mississippi State, why wouldn't you? They can replicate that. It's a way to muck the game up, make it ugly, and then see if these teams want to win an ugly game.
Yeah.
And we just talked about the Cowboys won an ugly game. That was an ugly game. And not every team can win ugly like that. Tennessee couldn't win ugly. Arkansas made that an ugly game. Let's just make it ugly. Run the football, control the clock. Let's just muck it up. And Vanderbilt mucked it up. And Texas don't like ugly games, by the way.
No.
Texas would rather win and dictate the terms and separate and make things look pretty. So teams are going to try to make it ugly with Texas. And the rest of the teams they play, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, I think Oklahoma's going to be in that category. Kentucky plays a type of football like that. That'll be the test for Texas. That's why playing to the standard is so important. Because if you don't play to the standard, and that's why I'm happy that the Longhorns got a chance to sit home and watch this weekend, because they watched a lot of teams not play to the standard, self-inflicted wounds, be their own worst enemy, penalties and turnovers, and what happened? The mighty do fall. All right, to the unranked Alabama, Tennessee, and I think that is a great lesson for the Longhorns too, because by the way, they just had a game where they didn't play to the standard against Mississippi State, and that was a game for 3 quarters. And I think now witnessing it can happen to anybody in the SEC, it lets them know, like, this is your new home. This is the week-to-week grind. They always say any given Sunday. Well, in the SEC, it seems like it's going to be any given Saturday in the SEC this season.
It does. And
So
I'll say for Texas, man, this is a week that you're happy to have a bye week on the fact that your players could watch football this weekend.
Yeah, that's what I said.
And they could sit at home and watch this and have to understand, crap. Like, you got to be ready every single time. You got to be able to get in there. You have to make those big plays. That was one of the things in the Vanderbilt game. They were 12-18 on third down. They had 18 third downs in the game, and they can still come back and win, and they get 12 of them. It's like, if you make those plays, if Alabama knocks that down to 9 of 18, they go 50%, they probably win the game. Mm-hmm. Like, there's some of those, you just have, it can come down to a couple plays that Texas is going to have to make big plays on. But, it's now set out for you. It's all there. You understand what SEC play is going to be this season, and we can now officially take away the when everybody got mad at Texas for having the easiest schedule. That was that discussion that went on that Texas. I can't believe they handed Texas the easiest schedule in the SEC and all of that stuff. I think that's somewhat out the window now, right?
It's a favorable schedule.
It's a favorable, but
it's still a favorable. In my opinion, I still think it's a favorable schedule.
I think it is too, but I think we can take away that none of these teams have a shot against Texas. I think we can throw that out the window.
Agreed. Like I said, it's never as good as you think. It's never as bad as you think. And I think the SEC this season, it's not as good as we thought, the good teams, but those teams at the bottom of the SEC, or at least we assumed would be at the bottom, they're not going to be a pushover. Not at all. All right, we come back. We'll get into some Texas Oklahoma discussion. It is Texas OU week, so we'll start diving into that matchup a little bit, and we'll start talking about the factors, the X factors in that matchup between Texas and Oklahoma. I think the game plan for Texas is pretty simple. We'll go over when we come back right here on the Rodcast featuring Patrick Davis. I'm Lifetime Longhorn. Rod Davis coming back on the horn. All right, welcome back to the Rodcast. Time to get into some Texas Oklahoma discussion. We'll be breaking down this matchup all week long, and I think for Texas, this is a relatively simple game plan for Oklahoma. Now, I think the test is, or at least the conundrum for Texas, they're going to have something to break tendency. They had an extra bye week to get ready for this game, so they're going to have something up their sleeve. Something that you don't anticipate. All right, you're gonna have to win the chess match on the fly in some respect with this Oklahoma coaching staff. But I think you'll have way more resources available, and you'll just have, I think, the more advantages in this matchup overall to help you win that chess match, whatever it's going to be. So number one, you got to anticipate Oklahoma coming out with something new, a way to break tendency. I always say to win a big game, you got to break tendency. Not sure how they're going to do it, but I know they will. And Sark, by the way, has been expressing that openly now, that he expects teams to throw out some tendency breakers, things that they have not prepared for on film when they play them on Saturdays. And he said that multiple times this year. That's a sign of respect. And by the way, he should, because Texas is a big game for a lot of teams. And in big games, you have to break tendency, right? Because there's so much preparation that's being done. You do preparation in the off season for these big games. You circle them. You do prep in your bye weeks for these big games. Turns out the bye week is before the big game, and so I think it's a way ultimately to to allow an opponent's preparation and game plan to backfire on them. Almost do too much preparation. You build your game plan based on these tendencies and these different, patterns in terms of how the offense likes to operate, and then boom, you flip it all on its head, right? You flip the script on them. So both sides will have that, and we don't really know what that's going to be. And I'll dive into what I think that's going to be later on. I'm going to watch some more film on Oklahoma tonight, but the game plan for Texas. You want the quarterback, Hawkins, for Oklahoma to be a pocket passing quarterback. You want to keep a spy on him as much as possible in passing situation when he does have to drop back and become a pocket passing quarterback. And you want to choke the life out of the run game and force Oklahoma to throw the football downfield to their wide receivers, because right now they don't have any available wide receivers. I mean, their top 4 wide receivers have been dealing with injuries. They were out last game. They did obviously have a bye week, so they'll be healthier. There's a lot of talk that Deion Burks could end up playing for them. He's a guy that even Texas recruited. So that was their strength, in my opinion, going into this season, was their wide receiving crew. They might have had arguably the best wide receiving crew that Texas would face all year. But the Kim Kardashian, Nicki Minaj, Serena Williams size, Cardi B size, Megan Thee Stallion size butt is, I don't know if they have the offensive line that can protect the passer long enough and the passer who is capable enough to get them the football down the field. And right now, they don't have the bodies at the position to be able to exploit Texas in the passing game. And on top of that, Texas has a really good pass defense. Texas DBs are really good. They haven't been tested, but I still think they're still one of the best pass defenses in the country. And I think they are up to the task of being able to cover Oklahoma receivers. So that's your game plan in a nutshell. Because if Hawkins gets loose as a dual threat quarterback, that's going to be the problem. And they're going to, I believe, and maybe this is the tendency breaker, I think they're going to steal the Mississippi State game plan. It makes too much sense. All right. You have veer and shoot roots there on your team, because Jeff Lebby was just there, who was the Mississippi State head coach. Now he was just your OC. Last year you beat them running that veer and shoot offense. Now it's Seth Luttrell's version of it, but still has a veer and shoot DNA. So they can do some of the things, basically combine the veer and shoot formations and some of the principles with a power run game. And that's basically what we saw Mississippi State do, and they ran it 50 times, sprinkled in some quarterback run game, and Oklahoma can do that because they got a quarterback that can run, that is more than a capable runner. So add a +1 in the run game there and just convert. And as we said, the magical recipe for upsets this past weekend, if you didn't watch them, keep the football, control the ball, can dictate the terms of the matchup. Dictate the tempo, dictate the terms of the matchup by keeping the football. And early Mississippi State did that against Texas. Texas didn't play its style of game until when? Like the fourth quarter. It's basically when Texas started to separate from Mississippi State, when it was no longer a competitive game, but a talent deficient Mississippi State team stayed with Texas, mostly because of self-inflicted wounds, mistakes. But that's what Oklahoma's really good at, forcing mistakes. So if they take the Mississippi State game plan, all right, and boss hog a lot of the clock, which they're going to try to do, and just convert, sprinkle in quarterback run game. That's why Texas go all out to stop the run, in my opinion. Dare them to throw the football. Dare them to throw it. I'd almost treat them like Michigan. I dare you to throw the football. Please throw it. Like I'll give it to you, because you can't allow them to run the football, because they run the football, then they're gonna control the clock, dictate the terms. You don't want them doing that. And then that's the life that they need to just keep converting and to keep the football. You want to force Hawkins as a young quarterback to have to beat you from the pocket. And if they can actually keep the football for a while and convert, even if they're not putting points on the board like Mississippi State, that's still a win, because you're just limiting possessions and limiting snaps for Texas. And hopefully Texas is not their own worst enemy and protects the football and protects Quinn. But if Texas doesn't protect Quinn and they don't protect the football, then Oklahoma's got Texas right where they want them. Because Oklahoma, even after a bye week, you go look at takeaways, they're still top five in the country in the takeaways. And you go look at them, and they're top 5 in sacks. And so they're not a sound, defense all around. They're just a defense that makes a lot of havoc plays and a lot of splash plays. And after this past week, I take that back. They're top 10 in sacks. So top 5 in takeaways. Remember, they had that bye week, and they're top 10 in sacks after last week. But that's what they want to do. And that's not what they usually do, but now they have to tweak and modify their model. They're going to take the Mississippi State game plan, and they're going to hope that their defense can force Texas into making some mistakes, whether that be turnovers and takeaways, or whether that be negative plays they get, like sacks and like tackles for loss. And so, to me, Texas to win, offensively, it's a pretty simple, I think it's a pretty simple solution for Texas. If you protect Quinn and you protect the football, you're going to beat Oklahoma. If you protect Quinn and protect the football, you'll beat them, because that's what their defense feeds on. It feeds on negative plays, and it feeds on, takeaways. That's why they're in their top 5, top 10, and top 15 in takeaways, sacks, and tackles for loss. They're a havoc-minded defense. If you limit their havoc plays, you'll just march down the field on them. You will. They won't. That's like I said. But havoc plays, that's what keeps them in games, and that really is ultimately what their identity as a team is their defense. So opportunistic. They got studs at every level of their defense, and they got a really good, brilliant defensive-minded coach in Brent Venables. So to me, if Texas protects the passer and they protect the football, that's Oklahoma is really. You're not going to give any life to the defense. You're going to suffocate it, and then ultimately they'll break if you can avoid, like I said. But what happened last year? Takeaways, negative plays. Now Texas still was in a position to win it, but they had enough negative plays and enough takeaways against Texas in key moments, in the red zone, in critical moments, where they were able to win that game and pull it out against Texas. I don't think Oklahoma's good enough to do that this year, because they don't have a quarterback like Dylan Gabriel. But they will find a way to break Tennessee. What was the big Tennessee breaker last year? Dylan Gabriel ran for more yards than he ever had in his career. He had never been activated like that as a rusher. So that's how they broke Tennessee last year, and they beat Texas with him scrambling and with the quarterback draws. How would they do it this year? Something tells me that, I think that Mississippi State game plan is going to be in the nutshell, but they'll find another way to try to exploit a weakness that Texas has maybe exposed, or maybe something Texas has been exploited on early this year, but not a lot. I think they're going to take shots, though. They got to take shots. They're going to take, and Mississippi State did, by the way. Mississippi State took like 3-4 shots downfield, got behind Texas DBs a couple of times. I guarantee Oklahoma's going to try it, and they got better receivers, and Hawkins probably has a better arm to get it downfield against the Texas DB. So that's something they got to watch too. And so for Texas, it's pretty simple. For Oklahoma, I think ultimately they're going to rely on Texas to be its own worst enemy. If Texas has self-inflicted wounds, which we've seen some of those this year, it could end up being a longer game for Texas. But I got all confidence Texas will win this game versus Oklahoma, because Texas is a much better team. They got the quarterback advantage. They got the O-line advantage. I think they got the defense. I don't know about the overall. I mean, the back seven for Oklahoma is really impressive, but I think overall Texas has a better defense too. than Oklahoma. Oklahoma's is more opportunistic and more of a playmaking defense, arguably, than Texas defense is. But I think Texas defense also is better. So Texas has the advantage in a lot of ways, but it's the Texas OU game, and you can throw all that out the door when these two teams face off. All right, we come back. We'll get into the topic for the Big Fat Poll today. We'll also get into the music theme day of the week right here on the Rodcast featuring Patrick Davis. I'm Lifetime Longhorn. Rod Babers coming back on the horn.
Back on the Rodcast on a Monday morning, and that means it's a Smooth Soul Monday, playing you some Smooth Soul to ease you back in to the work week. Let's get to the Big Fat Poll of the day. Text lines open 512-447-3776, and we'll get this posted up on X at the Horn ATX.
Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the day on the Horn.
All right, Big Fat Poll of the day. Now that we saw what happened over the weekend, we will ask you, which team with a top 10 upset still on the Texas schedule this season worries you the most? So there is 4 teams Texas plays that have upset a top 10 team now: Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Texas A&M. Some of those games were thought to be easier than others. Now we know that these teams can go but up there. Vanderbilt and Arkansas and A&M are all on the road. Kentucky will be here, but Kentucky getting the big win last weekend over Ole Miss. Vanderbilt, Arkansas, and A&M all having top 10 upsets this week. All those teams now have shown that they can go in and pull a big upset. So which one of those teams does now worry you the most? Are you worried about going to Vanderbilt and seeing if they can go in there? Are you worried about Arkansas, thinking that they're going to be pretty primed up, got some talent? Is it Kentucky that has played some teams really, really tough? They played Georgia really tough. They get the win over Ole Miss the next weekend. Is it Texas A&M? Is it that been them the whole time? And they got the talent on that team, and they seem to be putting it together a little bit more. Is that the one that you think Kyle Field into the season? Maybe that one worries you the most. Which team with a top 10 upset still on the Texas schedule worries you the most? It's
a good question. I mean, that's basically, like I said, it. That's what I saw over the weekend. I was like, yeah, we underestimated what we assumed to be the bottom dwellers of the SEC, and we may have overestimated how good the top dogs in the SEC are. But still, I still think they're all good teams. But the point is, I do think you're gonna, if you're Texas, now you got to go deal with a lot of these teams who, we underrated, as I pointed out, that we underrated, and you got to deal with them on the road now. So the Kentucky one is out for me because you got that one at home.
Okay.
The road ones, that Arkansas one, it might be it for me now. In terms of the one I'm concerned about the most. To your question,
yes.
The topic of the which one of those teams on your schedule left who have a win over a top 10 team that concerns you the most, it's probably going to be Arkansas right now. And we'll see how the Taylor Green injury is, because their starting quarterback, Taylor Green, went down in that game. He still pulled the upset over Tennessee, but he went down. He could be a problem. You go look at it. He's got some physical tools that can be a problem for Texas, be a problem for anybody. And the Arkansas defense played better than I thought. I thought the Arkansas defense played better against Tennessee than I thought. I will say that the veer and shoot offense, which we were just kind of talking about, there is a specificity to it. So game plan wise, if you match up really well with it, or you can stop the run with the light box, it really does help. And you can keep your two deep safeties back there to limit the explosive plays. It really does help. But yeah, Arkansas probably for me because of the running backs they have. They got that freshman who's like 250 pounds. His name was like Braylon Russell. He was a beast in that game. Then they got Jaquindon Jackson. Both those guys are averaging over 5 yards per carry, and they're big backs, 230, 250. Power running game against Texas. Downhill running game, +1 with the quarterback. They hate Texas more than they love themselves, and we laugh about that. And it's a funny quote, but it works for them, guys.
It does.
Think about when they play Texas and how well they play against Texas. And everybody's got a little piece. Every generation of Longhorn gets a little piece of Arkansas. I got it, and I didn't like it. They beat me in '99, right? Every generation. Think about it. Every 4 or 5 years we end up playing them, and what do? They seem to beat Texas, and because it matters more to them a lot of the times. Not every time, but think about it recently, because it mattered more to them, and that one worries me a little bit. That one worries me. Now that you're talking about it, that one concerns me a little.
Well, it concerns you a little bit. And I'll just throw this out there. I get Kentucky's at home, and that should make it not as scary. Texas does not have a great track record of being a dominant home team in the last 5-6 years. And I know this is a different team than that, but they've played plenty of games really, really close at home. They've lost games at home. They are not a team that, well, this is not the Alabama team that does not lose at Bryant-Denny, which that's no longer the thing. But the Nick Saban had that for a long time, that they didn't lose there. This isn't that. I mean, so I believe there's times that they believe that they have that more than they do, and then don't show up for a game and mentally are not as prepared as they need to be. And on the road, maybe it's a little bit easier to focus than it is at home. So I won't even say that there's necessarily the massive home field advantage for Texas that they like. Now, the crowd seems to be doing pretty good this year. So I'll give props to the crowds that they seem to be coming out and making a difference this year. But I'm just even watching that Vanderbilt game, it's still not going to be the one that worries me the most, because as much as that game was crazy to watch, that quarterback will have to play a perfect game again. He played a near perfect game.
He had a hell of a game. Diego Pavia though is a player.
He is.
He can play.
No, I mean, that's what I'm saying, though. But he has to have a near perfect, because that was a near perfect game he had where he just did not make mistakes. He picked up third downs. He did everything right. And that's a really, really hard thing to do over and over again against top level defenses. So I'm not that probably wouldn't scare as much as an Arkansas team that is going to be just really, really pushing on getting up for that game. And if Texas can get up for that one, the Kentucky game worries me a little bit because I feel like it could be close. I feel like they could just keep it in that range, and any game that you feel could be in that range worries me a little bit. And I mean, I get Texas A&M. It's going to be a rough game. It's a rivalry game. They're always close, but it still doesn't. I don't know why, but I haven't. I feel like they're going to screw this up at some point. I don't know.
They could, but I will say that's going to be the most hostile environment Texas.
Oh, 100%.
And it'll probably be the most hostile environment that they faced in years as a program. Period. Like, it's just going to be crazy. Whether they're really good or not. And I got the feeling they're actually going to be, good. I don't know if they're going to be great or where they're going to be. But right now, they're 3-0 in SEC play, and I'm, telling you, man, if actually like matters in terms of who's going to go to the SEC title game, and it may, depending on how things shake out here. Oh man, that they are going to be playing. It's going to be like an out of body experience for those fans and for that team, and that's going to be it's going to be a religious experience. I've described it. That's how it's going to feel for them, and for Quinn going into that game and how they handle it. It's going to be it's a legacy game for Quinn. He's got a couple of these actually. Legacy game. I don't know if they're because this year the Texas A&M game is bigger than the Texas OU game. Just only this year. It's not the case.
I'll differ on that
but
one.
It is this year.
I'll say if Texas wins, the A&M game is much bigger. If Texas loses to OU, Quinn Ewers has a losing record against OU.
But I think there's a different point than this, because even Sark would have a losing record versus them too. So I think it's a different point than I think this year still. I've been saying it from day one. Paul Feinbaum has agreed, and others. The A&M game is bigger this year than OU game, and it feels that way even with the injuries now to Oklahoma and how the offense looks. The Aggies are trending one way, Oklahoma's trending the other way. It feels like. So as I'm saying now, I think it's confirmed that game feels bigger. You got to win that game. But you're right. You can't have a losing record versus Oklahoma either. Can't look up and be like, I'm 1-3 versus Oklahoma. It's like, no, that's not acceptable. Ask Mac Brown. You can win double-digit games and still be on the hot seat, because Longhorn fans don't want. Ask Ryan Day, by the way, because you can't beat your rival. Like, no, and I mean, it's gonna happen to Sark, but you can't have that. You can't have a losing record.
No, and that's if Quinn wants to get up in that conversation of the great Texas quarterbacks. That's one of those things. You have to have the winning record there.
Got to beat Oklahoma.
Got to beat OU.
Come on now. That's all right. I mean, Sims is one of the greatest quarterbacks in Texas football history, and Longhorn fans will not. They will argue me down. That's the case because they didn't beat Oklahoma.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Exactly. That's just the reality of it. You got to beat Oklahoma. So trust me, I know I didn't beat them enough. I'm on those teams. I own that. That's what kept us from being a really great team. All right, good stuff there. We can have a lot of discussion about that topic actually, but I'm interested to hear and see what Longhorn fans think about it. So go check out the topic for the Big Fat Poll today. We'll get that posted for you at the Horn ATX. We come back, we'll talk about the wild, wacky weekend that was in college football, and also talk about the Texans and their big win over the Buffalo Bills. Cowboys as well with a big win last night, showing a lot of testicular fortitude, literally and figuratively. All of that and more right here on the Rodcast, featuring Patrick Davis on Lifetime Longhorn. Rod Rivers coming back on the Horn. Welcome back to the Rodcast. It is a Smooth Soul Monday edition of the Rodcast. That's when Patrick plays jams that are intended to soothe the tortured soul of sports fans who may have had a tough weekend. And in order for you to deal with all of the stress of Monday, with all the traffic and the meetings and, oh man, all the adulting you have to do, that can be a bit traumatic, especially when you're coming off a stress-free, fun-filled weekend. And that's why my man Patrick comes up with a Smooth Soul Monday to make it a smooth transition from the weekend to the work week. So we appreciate him and all of his efforts with our musically themed days of the week. He also comes up with the topic for the big fat poll of the day, which is posted at the Horn ATX. Go check it out. He wants to go, Patrick, give the folks the topic for the big fat poll of the day.
Big fat poll of the day today. Which team with a top 10 upset still on the Texas schedule this season worries you the most?
Yeah. Right now, it seems pretty split. Yes, either Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Kentucky, or Texas A&M. Kentucky, I'm going to eliminate them because that's at home. Because now the road teams in Texas doesn't get. And I'm going to eliminate Vanderbilt, even though Vanderbilt just got their biggest win in the history of the program. I'm going to eliminate that one just because I just think with where they are in their program, I doubt they got two of them in them. I just don't think they got the emotional bandwidth for another big upset. They may have it in them. Maybe I'm underestimating Vanderbilt. Tells me that a program like Vanderbilt, you got one of those in you a season as you continue to rise and ascend. Not saying Clark Lee's not doing a good job, doing a damn good job. By the way, we'll talk more about that upset. But that was really impressive. I haven't seen something that impressive in a long time. But I don't know if Vanderbilt's got another one like that in them. That's basically what they would have to do to beat Texas. Have we seen a team do that? Have a game, basically a program like Vanderbilt, have an upset like beating number one in the country as an unranked team, and something they've never done in the history of the program, and then have another one? I'm talking Boise State might have did that back in the day when they were just starting to ascend.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen a lot. Usually you get one of them upset, and then these teams, they kind of regress to the mean. So I'm not saying that they are a bad team. They're better than we thought. But I don't think Vanderbilt's got two of them. Usually programs don't got two of them. No. Two upsets over number one teams in the same year. Now I'm saying Texas may not be number one when they play them, but you get my point.
Yeah, because you say like, you get a turnover in there, the game changes. You get, you don't pick up a couple first downs in there, the game change. There's so many ways that is just so many little things in that Alabama still wins that game, where Texas wins, like whoever it is can still win that game. So it is. I mean, you get there, but that is very difficult to do a couple times in a season.
Yeah, it's because it's not impossible, but it's improbable.
Yeah, the only team that had a top 10 win that did it walking away was A&M.
The Aggies.
The Aggies had one walking away, where that was no. They can do that again. They could beat Missouri over and over again if they played them like that, because it wasn't close.
Yeah, exactly. That's why, like I said, I'll eliminate Vanderbilt and Kentucky. I think it's got to be Arkansas or Texas A&M. And right now with Texas A&M having Connor Wigman back and him looking healthy and him having one of his more impressive flashes, and the Aggies do have a defense. Mike Echols a good defensive mind. So we've said that before the season started. They got a legit defense. We just didn't know about the offense with Colin Klein coming in, new OC. What was the O-line going to look like? They have the skill positions on the outside to really threaten teams. So those are still questions I think they're answering. But if this is the beginning of them acclimating and familiarizing themselves, becoming more and more acquainted with that Colin Klein system, with a healthy Connor Wigman, with that defense, and we know how hostile that environment is going to be, that is, yes, Longhorn fans probably should be a little anxious about that game. And I would say Arkansas will be thrown in the same mode. If you want to say either or, but I get you if you want to say the Aggies, that's a bigger rival than Arkansas. But Arkansas, guys, they usually, it's weird. It's almost they play at a higher level when they play Texas because of the emotional charge. And there's no doubt they actually use that competitive hatred. They have been able as a community and as a program to channel it right versus Texas and do it very successful over the last 10, 12 years or so. Arkansas is not supposed to be able to play with Texas, and yet when they play Texas, they play with Texas. Talent-wise, they're not supposed to be on the same level, but they do. And I think what fills in the gap or fills the void or closes the gap is the emotional charge that they play with. Texas doesn't play with that same emotional charge because they don't hate Arkansas more than they love themselves. But for Arkansas fans, even though coaching me, he's like, yeah, that's probably true. It's probably true. We probably hate them more than we love ourselves. And it's like, damn, you're just going to admit it like that, Sam Pittman? Like, yeah. And it's like, okay. All right. So, but Sam Pittman is a very genuine guy. They asked him after they upset Tennessee, they asked him what the field is like about, because it's AD. They asked him, I think is it 100 euro check, their AD? They asked him, like, does he like that the guys are the team that the fans, are rushing the field and celebrating with the team and taking up the goalposts and stuff? And he's like, I don't care. I don't care if my AD likes it or not. Because he's like on the hot seat and stuff. Yeah, exactly. I just love the way he talks. I don't care if he likes it or not. But there you go. Stay up here with a big win. But I would say Arkansas to A&M. I don't think you can go wrong with either one of them. A&M is probably higher, but Arkansas to me would be just as scary of a situation, a confluence of circumstances, especially if Taylor Green is still healthy, the quarterback for Arkansas.
Yeah.
So right now, I think the Aggies are leading. No surprise there.
No, it is. It is still funny too. Is after this week, I had the thought of looking up when the SEC championship game was, where you go, wait a minute, could Texas and Texas A&M technically play back-to-back weeks now?
Yeah, like I said, good point. We got to look at these tiebreakers. I haven't checked them out.
But it's like if you put them in there, if they both walked into that undefeated in SEC play, then it, I believe, could technically happen 2 weeks in a row, which would be,
you're right,
because there isn't divisions right now, so it's not like it's
two
best
teams.
It's much down the line. Both teams have to be. Have to get there.
But I remember we talked about this back in the offseason, and now we're here damn near halfway through the season, and still talking about it.
Yeah. So
it's more than just some random like projection or prognostication at this point. The Aggies at A&M is 3-0 right now in league play. They're right now in the 16-team conference where most teams have played only 2 games. Only 3 SEC teams remain undefeated in league play. A&M is 3-0. Texas, of course, and then number 13 LSU are 1-0. Texas and LSU are 1-0, but A&M is 3-0 in league play.
And they won't lose a game next week because they're on a bye, so they will still be good going in to the following week. They'll have, and that's when they play Mississippi State, so they should get a win there as well. And then you have that LSU game, which will be really, really big because LSU also undefeated in conference play.
And that's at home, I think, right? That's in Aggie Land, I believe.
It is at Aggie Land, yes.
Yeah, so there's a good chance. I remember I was talking about this offseason. One was like, shut up. Don't be talking about the Aggies potentially being good. Like, I'm just saying, the schedule, if they can get through the beginning of the schedule, and that Missouri game, I think, was one of the points we talked about. It's like, if they can get through this Missouri game and they're still undefeated in SEC play, the Aggies have a really favorable stretch until they get to Texas.
Yeah.
And then, as Patrick mentioned, who knows what the SEC tiebreaker rules say about.
I know we heard Sark joke about the SEC tiebreaker rules at a point that he got to page 4 and stopped reading, but they're pretty convoluted and long. But
you got 9 teams already who have 1 SEC loss.
Yeah.
And Mississippi, I think South Carolina, Kentucky, and Mississippi State have lost twice. Auburn is the only team that's 0-3 in conference play, so they're pretty much out of things. But hey, man, it's looking crazy. Like I said, it's not, that league is very different than I think we anticipated it would be, but still looks like it's going to be very competitive. It's not that dissimilar from the Big 12 in a lot of ways. I know people want to knock the Big 12, but the Big 12, the big dogs weren't always as formidable as we thought. And then you would always get surprised by your Iowa States of the world or your Texas Techs of the world a little bit. So yes, more competitive, better athletes, but I still think the same weekly focus, right, and sense of urgency for Texas, it still applies because now Vandy, Kentucky, as Texas, even Mississippi State, we assume would be a pushover. Not really a pushover. So maybe there's not a pushover left in the league. Maybe that's the whole point.
No, and
there's
I mean,
no pushovers left in this league.
It's a funny thing because how much has the conversation been on NIL and transfer portal with the haves and the have-nots, and that, these smaller teams won't be able to compete. And it feels like, at least in the Power 5 conferences, it's given a few players to some smaller schools, or an ability for smaller schools to still be able to compete in this landscape, that somehow these smaller schools are still being able to put up a fight. So it has not destroyed parity, at least in the Power 5 conferences.
No, I think a lot of it's got to be the availability of quarterbacks.
Yeah.
You can't boss hog them too much. You can't. I mean,
You can't.
you can't keep a great stable of quarterbacks anymore. You can keep them for maybe a year, but after that, your second string quarterback, if they're a good quarterback, they're leaving. Your blue chip quarterback transfer rate is 65%. So all the blue chips are just trying to find a home, and sometimes they're like, you know what, I'll go play for this school. I'll play for this. I mean, Diego Pavia, right? Didn't he come from New Mexico State or something like that? Goes to Vanderbilt, running that system. Boom. Now he's a star. And I think in the post game, he was like, God gave me a vision of this. And then he dropped like an F-bomb like 10 seconds later. But still, this shows you, I mean, the quarterback availability, I think that's a big part of it.
He was New Mexico State, which before that, the New Mexico Military Institute.
Yeah. Right. It's like, I mean, that's a big part of it. It's like you end up finding these that was your big issue usually in being competitive with those schools. Like, can we get a quarterback that can at least play the position at a capable, competent level that we can still be competitive? And now you're finding that at lower levels, right? Diego Pavia had a really good game, so I think that's one part of it. But you're right, it is interesting because the separation of the have and have-nots was supposed to become more and more glaring, and yet seems like now we got some of the biggest upsets that we've had in recent history.
And can we mention one thing? Can we mention one thing real quick too, which was the funniest part of that broadcast of the Alabama Vanderbilt broadcast was when they showed Diego Pavia's brothers, and then they show his brothers, who are both decked out, gold chains, cowboy hats, celebrating in the crowd, right? And then they go, didn't have botanist as the job. And,
really?
And all of us go, botanist. We go, I know what you've grown. I know what you're growing, botanist.
Yeah,
you put botanist.
A term.
You put botanist on your taxes, but I know what you've grown.
Hey, that is technically the term. I believe it is. You can go to school for botany.
It just made me laugh so because I was watching with some friends. He's like, botanist, like, come on now, botanist.
Hey, you know what? These days, it's one of the fastest growing industries in America.
It was just hilarious because the announcers, I don't think, got what we were.
Get it.
They were like botany, and you're like, I guess he's just got he's maybe a rose shop, maybe a flower shop. He's kind of.
Yeah, they didn't get it. It's like, no, man, botany, man. These days, trust me, it's a certain. Now that botany room in college looks totally different than it used to.
It smells different too.
Right. Used to be a different vibe, a group of people in there. Now it's like, man, look at this botany class. It's kind of hype now. It's kind of cool in there. Yeah, you're right. Probably smells different too. Yeah, Ricky Williams would have been your botany class.
Yes, Ricky would have been the botanist.
These days, right? You have a really cool botany class. I will say this: there are a lot of athletes. My boy, Bo Scaife, shout out to Bo Skis. He's into the marijuana industry, and he's killing it up in Colorado. So there are a lot of athletes, actually, and Ricky, of course, is into it. A lot of athletes who have decided to get into recreational marijuana because it is a fast-growing business. A lot of straight cash homie in that business. All right, speaking of straight cash homie, let's get my man Patrick, who's always straight cash homie. Let's get him on the horn headlines. Then we'll come back and we'll discuss some NFL news, notes, and nuggets. Talk about the Texans and their big win over the Buffalo Bills. But first, let's get educated. Let's get updated. Let's get informed with all the top stories of the day with Patrick Davis and the Horn Headlines.
All right, your Horn Headlines brought to you by Top Gun Rentals and Lawn Equipment. In the MLB playoffs, the divisional round begin Saturday with all four series. The Guardians got a 7-0 victory over the Tigers, putting up 5 runs in the first. The Yankees rallied to beat the Royals 6-5. While in the NL, both series are even at 1-1 after the Phillies beat the Mets on Sunday, and the Padres got a big 10-2 win over the Dodgers. The AL will start their game twos today. In the NBA, all 3 Texas teams begin their preseason this evening, with the Rockets taking on the Jazz, the Mavericks facing the Grizzlies, and the Spurs going up against the Thunder. The regular season starts in 2 weeks on October 22nd. In college football, 6 top 25 teams were upset this weekend, including 4 in the top 10. Alabama, Tennessee, Missouri, Michigan, USC, and Louisville all lost, with Miami needing a last-second heroics from Cam Ward once again to avoid an upset in their game against Cal. After the weekend, Texas regained the number 1 ranking heading into the Red River rivalry. And in the NFL, the Texans' Kaimi Fairbairn hit a 59-yard field goal as time expired to get a 23-20 win over the Bills, while the Cowboys stuffed out a 20-17 win over the Steelers on Sunday Night Football. An injury-depleted Cowboys defense night got worse when rookie Marshawn Nealon injured his knee and had to be carted off, but the team responded, limiting the Steelers to only 226 yards. Tonight, the Chiefs look to remain undefeated against the Saints, and that is your Horn headlines.
All right, thank you, Patrick, for the Horn headlines. Appreciate those. One of the Horn headlines, of course, you were talking about the Texans and their win over the Buffalo Bills. It ended up being a tight game, and I don't really know how, because you thought the Texans would have pulled away from the Bills, considering how they started that game against the Bills. Started out with a 2-touchdown lead early in that game against the Buffalo Bills, but Bills battled back because the Texans' offense really hit a snag, got clunky in the second half. We'll talk about that, but the Texans, I think the most impressive stat, most impressive feat, if you will, for the Texans in that game was them holding Josh Allen to 30% completion percentage.
Historically bad.
It was the lowest completion percentage in the last 30 years for any quarterback with at least 30 pass attempts. That guy came into the game as the front runner for the MVP. And yet the Texans not only shut him down, they made him look inept at times. Of the 131 yards passing that he had, 49 of those came on a fourth down catch and run TD from Keon Coleman. That was on that big explosive play they had. But other than that, the Texans pretty much put the cuffs on Josh Allen. Now, a big part of this was the wide receiving core for the Bills was hampered with injury. They did not have their leading receiver available to them today in that game. So that was a big part of it. But other than that, you'd have thought that Josh Allen would have been able to make more plays against that Texans defense. He could not. So Texans looked really good defensively. Offensively, what I loved about it, at least early on in the first half, 0 penalties and 0 sacks allowed for the Texans by the Texans O-line in the first half. That was big, considering that was one of the big issues that I think were holding this team back, that caused that regression that often caused them to be in third and long too much. Oh, speaking of, they were in third and long, still too much in my opinion, but they didn't average 39+ yards to gain in this game versus the Bills. They averaged 3rd and 7. So it was better. It still wasn't ideal, but they were better on some of the early downs. They didn't have as many of those self-inflicted wounds and pre-snap penalties and mistakes, and it didn't have as many of those negative plays early on in the game. And you can see how much better the offense looks, how much more effective it is and efficient it is when they are not, shooting themselves in the foot and their own worst enemy. So I did like the fact that they were in more third and manageable. Yes, 3rd and 7 is still technically 3rd and long, but think about it. They came into this game averaging 3rd and 9+ yards to gain on 3rd down. So I thought that was a huge step in the right direction for the Texans.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you watch that first half, you just want to show them the game film. Like, if you play like this, you're a Super Bowl contender.
Pretty much.
And if you play like the second half, we'll win the division because it's a garbage division. And that's the ceiling. Because if you play like you did in the second half, you had 2 turnovers, you allowed 2 sacks, you had 7 penalties for 65 yards, all in the second half.
All in the second.
Clean first half.
Yeah.
Big lead. Everything's going great. Second half, dirty, terrible. You get beat pretty badly in the second half. But you're able to win the game. It's really cut and dry of where the problems were. And you watch that first half, you went, we didn't have penalties. We did, they didn't get to quarterback. Everything seemed to be going well. Cam Akers did okay, well enough running the football. You got some runs when you needed to get them. Ogunbowale was able to get some catches out of the backfield. He's not a great runner, but he can be a decent receiver out of the backfield. They can use him some. everything's, and I mean, you have Nico Collins. He goes down with that injury.
Yeah, he went down.
He catches
Yeah,
a big play,
hamstring.
somehow runs away, finishes the run, and then walks off and goes, "Yeah, I'm hurt."
He tweaked it right at the end, though. If you watch the video, it was like right at the end. Like literally, he was like stepping into the end zone. He tweaked it.
Yeah.
It's just freakish. Yeah, unfortunately for the Texans.
But he comes out, and so that's part of why
the closed strong.
Yeah, and that was part of the reason why the second half was a little bit more difficult for them, is because you take away. But Diggs finished strong. It was overall a really good team effort in that, in the first half, and then in the second half it started to fall apart, and you're happy you get out of it with a win. But that is the easiest game film watching session. I'm going to show you two different games. One of this is a team that can win a lot of games, and one is not. And you have to figure out how we can be that team. You've shown you can do it now. You just got to not go into halftime and come back out with somehow a different mindset.
Yeah, you can do it against a good team.
Too. Yeah.
I mean, the Bills are a team that came into that game. I know they had the big issue against the Ravens. The Ravens put it on them. The Ravens right now looking look like they're turning things around. I will say that. Ravens just started out on the struggle bus, but look like the Ravens are turning things around. But I digress. Getting back to it, the Texans, I don't know how long Nico Collins is going to be out. That could be a problem because hamstring injuries, they end up, lasting, and you got to let them heal completely. You don't want to re-injure a hamstring. So they may be really careful with him. I think they go to New England, I believe, next for the Texans. I believe it's New England. So maybe you can beat New England. New England's got a good defense, so maybe you can beat them without Nico. Nico is still leading receiver in the league right now. Ended with 567 yards. Dude, halfway to 1,000 yards already. He's just a monster out there. But the Texans, also something else that I liked about what I saw from the Texans, that you talk about that first half. I mean, in that first half for the Texans, they didn't have a lot of third and longs came in the second half too when the offense got clunky. They were able to stay ahead of the chains a lot of times early on in that game. And so you're right. It's kind of the best of times for the Texans and the worst of times. They have been bad in the second half all season long, actually.
Yeah.
They came into that game averaging just a little over eight and a half points in the second half of games, and they scored just 6 on Sunday. So the next big issue, I think, third downs, we talked about, that was something that was going to be a glaring flaw for them that would hold them back from beating good teams. And I'm not saying they corrected that, but they were much better on third downs. And CJ Stroud is just, he's just elite in those types of situations. But you don't want to put too much on his plate, but he still was great on third downs. I believe if you just look on the third downs alone, he had like a 100 passer rating when they were throwing the ball on third down. So even though they were in third and long, they still converted a lot of those situations just because he's so damn good in those situations. But I think the next thing they got to address is second half scoring.
Yeah.
His passer rating was 100.6 when he threw the ball on third downs. He had a 64% completion percentage, 151 yards passing. And they were, if you go look at it, it's amazing. I said they were in third and long, I think 9 times still, and they were still able to convert. So sometimes it's just CJ Stroud working magic, but you don't want to have to depend on that. So they got to get the third and longs under control, which I think they were better at. 3rd and 7 is, but the second half scoring is the next big issue for the Texans that could end up derailing their championship hopes. If you want to beat the Chiefs and the Ravens, that could end up being one of the big flaws in your model to win.
Yeah.
You got to be able to score in the second half.
And we got a question on the text line, which I'll let you answer too. But he asked, why did the Texans not run the ball there at the end when they kept throwing the ball with CJ Stroud at that end? He gets the grounding penalty. Yeah. And so all that, why they didn't run the ball, I can tell you why. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I can tell you why. It's because in the first half, they had a 4th and 1 that they went for. At the time, CJ Stroud is doing nothing wrong. He's near perfect in the first half. And you put the ball in a run game that isn't working really well and run it up the middle and do a stacked line. And you watch that film at halftime, and you go back at halftime, and the coaches look at each other and go, oh, if I could do that again a million times, I would always give the ball to CJ Stroud in that situation. I get it's an easy call, 1 yard, you run up the middle, but you have a quarterback playing like CJ Stroud who's been a hero all game. I'm going to put the ball in his hands.
You should.
And so that's why. Is at the end of the game, they messed it up in the first half. They tried to do it in reality, if Dalton Schultz goes where he's supposed to, it's not a problem. CJ Stroud threw the ball to where Dalton Schultz was supposed to be going.
Yeah.
He just stopped running the route and cut back in.
Mm-hmm.
But if Dalton Schultz goes there, at worst, it's not an intentional grounding and they can kick the field goal there.
No, you're right.
But that was a Dalton Schultz stopped running the route and he threw it that way. But that was the reason why they didn't, as far as I can tell, was basically they screwed it up in the first half and should have put the ball in CJ's hands then. And then it compounded it by not running the ball and they didn't in the game.
Yeah, no, they right now that's their best option is to just put it in CJ's hands because they can't trust the running game right now.
And once you get Mixon back, it changes.
It does. Yep, I agree with that. But right now, you can't trust it. And like I said, CJ's been that good. They were 50% on third downs in that game. And like I said, I think more than half of those were third and longs. CJ was brilliant. So he's great. When you know he's going to throw the football, he's been really good throwing the football on early downs. And I think that's really ultimately why the Texans, they've been, I think 70% early on of their yards have been through the air, like as a team, so their total yards have been passing yards. And that's just because they don't have a running game right now. So maybe that's the other thing. In addition to working on third and long, working on second half scoring, they got to fix the running game, but it may not be fixed until Joe Mixon comes back and he's healthy.
Yeah. And also, why are we catching balls on punts at the 1 yard line?
Yeah.
I don't really get that one.
Yeah.
I don't get that one, but
that doesn't make sense.
Maybe I'm just old school. Maybe there is a new logic in it.
There's no new logic. No, I don't know. You let that go into this zone, you get the touchback.
They did it twice.
Yep. I can't explain that. I really can't. I can't explain that. There are some times where you do have to question like the situational awareness of the Texans.
Yes.
Yep. And some of I agree with that. And that's on D'Amico, by the way.
It is.
That's on D'Amico as a coach. Sometimes their situational awareness seems to be a bit off. And yeah, you can't really have that. I don't know that makes no sense at all. That's you learned that in high school. Honestly, I think you might learn it in middle school. Actually,
you learn it if you watch football in middle school. You don't even got to play.
You really got to play.
Hey man, you put your feet at the 5 or the 10, and you don't move backwards.
So I don't get that. Maybe it's just a brain fart or whatever by the Texans return. Man, was that Woods?
It was Woods because Sims had the muff one last week.
That's right.
So they pulled Sims off of it because it wasn't. And Woods did it twice. But that was the thing is you do it the first time.
Return too. Actually,
well, the first one he returned to the 19. So if he lets it go into the end zone, it's a touchback. Maybe it was the punter and he was really really good at getting the spin back. And so they were like, just return it because it's gonna bounce back anyway. But I'd still play that odds because the second one he got lit up.
He deserved to get lit up because you were supposed to be returning that. You're supposed to get lit up because your block is probably like, oh no, he's gonna let that go to the end zone anyway. Yeah, so we're not going to worry about that. And yeah, he decides to return it. That's crazy. All right, there you go. So that's some Texans talk. We come back. We'll get to some of the big upsets of the weekend in college football. We'll talk about those a little bit more. Cowboys with a big win over the Pittsburgh Steelers on the road. Of course, that becomes also a big topic of discussion for us today. And Longhorns in the in game week mode. They are back after their bye week. We're talking about the Sooners. And I got a stat for you that really does favor the Longhorns in this matchup. So we'll talk about that too. All of it more when we come back right here on the Rodcast featuring Patrick Davis. I'm Lifetime Longhorn. Rod Babers coming back on the Horn. Hey, what's up, folks? Lifetime Longhorn Rod Davis here. Let's talk about Dr. Record and his wonderful team. I owe them a huge debt of gratitude. I initially went there for a routine checkup and cleaning, and while they were doing their checkup and being very thorough with that checkup, they found that my wisdom teeth were growing in sideways. I was on the verge of a disastrous situation, and I actually potentially could have actually had other teeth affected, could have my molars affected, and it could have been, like I said, a very bad problem for me. But no need to worry about that because Dr. Eck and his team, they acted quickly, made sure I was informed and educated about the entire process, got the procedure scheduled, made sure I was comfortable with the procedure, and had everything done and had everything wrapped up, and I was back at work within a couple of days. And my dental health and dental hygiene have never been better, thanks to Dr. Eckert and his team. And right now, because of all the technological advances that Dr. Eckert has, he can not only take care of serious, very serious issues that like having all your wisdom teeth extracted, but anything that you need, very routine or convenient procedures like general dentistry or teeth whitening, dentures, porcelain crowns, veneers, dental implants, full mouth reconstruction, even root canal therapy, whatever it takes to ensure you're getting the best quality dental care available. That's what Dr. Eckert and his team are all about. So hopefully for you, it's not as serious as the issues that I had, but if it is, trust me, you're in great hands with Dr. Eckert and his team. And right now, he can give you a brand new smile in just one day as well. Permanently secured your dental implants. No time spent without teeth. You'll get temporary fixtures until they complete your permanent smile. You'll smile again and eat freely without pain or discomfort. We're talking about a lifelike permanent solution. So if you've been told your teeth need to be replaced, just call Dr. Eckert today to learn about this revolutionary alternative to dentures. It's a brand new smile in just one day. So call Dr. U today to learn about this complimentary consultation. You got nothing to lose, but so much to gain because a confident smile can truly change your life. And Dr. Eckert wants to change your life for the better. So give him a call, 512-345-3166. That's 512-345-3166. And right now, if you tell them you heard it on the horn, you'll get free Zoom whitening with whatever treatment or procedure you're getting at Dr. Eckert's office. That's drueckert.com, drueckert.com. All right, welcome back to the Rodcast. Let's talk a little bit about the college football weekend that was, because it was one of the wildest college football weekends, and we thought it was going to be boring. I mean, there was only one matchup of ranked opponents between the Aggies and Missouri, and we thought, oh, great weekend for a bye for the Longhorns because there won't be much going on. Well, I think we were all wrong. It was the first time in SEC history, actually, that AP top 5 SEC teams failed to unranked opponents on the same day. That never happened. Where you had two top 5 teams fall to unranked opponents on the same day. And of course, don't forget Texas A&M, who had top 25 ranking, and some polls weren't ranked, but at least AP, they were 25, and they beat a top 10 team in Missouri. And now, of course, sit alone, as we said, in first place in the SEC at 3-0. It's interesting. You start looking at the way things are shaken out. And we can talk about some of the upsets first, because the Vanderbilt upset over Alabama was easily the most mind-blowing that I've seen in a long time. Look at the game plan by Vanderbilt, who Diego Pavia went 16 of 20 for 252 yards, 2 touchdowns against Bama. Now, Vandy only averaged 3.5 yards per carry, but their run game was able to control the game, control the clock, dictate the tempo and the terms of the matchup. They had 42 minutes of possession. 42 minutes. It's crazy. Like, that is, I mean, usually time possession doesn't matter as much as it used to back in, when you were running the football a lot more, and both teams were running the football a lot more, and you had limited possessions. Now that you have high octane, really prolific offenses, I mean, think about Texas versus Mississippi State. They held the ball for, 7 minutes of the first quarter of that game, didn't score. Texas gets it, scores in like 6 plays. Takes no time off the clock. So usually it wouldn't be a big issue, but I think that is part of the recipe of an upset. The recipe of an upset is if you are severely outmatched and there's a huge talent gap and talent disparity, which there is, right? And which there were in these matchups, unranked opponents with Bama and with Tennessee, then you want to be able to control the game and control the clock. And you can see that's a big part of what happened in that matchup. And Diego Pavia, like I said, what he did basically was just allow his team he gave his team a chance, like on down after down, right? Just didn't make the big mistake, didn't hurt his team. I'm not saying he didn't make any big plays. He did. He made some big plays too. But what you have to avoid in those situations is the big mistake, because the big mistake is your margin for error when you're on the, obviously, you on the downside of that talent gap and talent disparity, you can afford the big mistake. And if you can avoid the big mistake and put the pressure on your opponent to do so, then that's when your recipe for an upset and that's why Texas can learn from this, your recipe for an upset, it may be starting to work, starting to simmer just a little bit. So for Texas going against Oklahoma, no, that's not a huge upset. That's a rivalry game. So when you talk about an upset like this, but think about what Mississippi State tried to do with Texas in that game. They ran it 50 times. What they gained? 3 yards per carry? Because it wasn't about getting yards all the time. I know it sounds like counterproductive, but it was more about controlling the tempo, dictating the tempo, and controlling the clock. And more importantly, limiting possessions for Texas. So in terms of lessons to be learned, that's a great lesson to be learned. Get off the field. You've got to get off the field. And even against Mississippi State, even though Texas, it's not enough just to not give up explosive plays in these matchups. You have to find a way to get off the field too. And I think for Texas against Mississippi State, that's where they struggled just a little bit. They didn't give up explosive plays. As I said, those guys averaged 3 yards per carry. They didn't give up a lot of chunk yardage plays, but they couldn't get off the field enough to get their offense back to football. And that's what, in the Oklahoma game, I guarantee you that is going to be part of what Brent Venables throws out there. Speaking of, Texas is, and by the way, give props to Clark Lee of Vanderbilt, because beating Kalen DeBoer is not easy. We watched Sark try to do it twice, and Sark couldn't do it. Kalen DeBoer is a hell of a coach. 3-0 versus Dan Lanning, 2-0 versus Sark. Hell, he just beaten Kirby Smart. He's beaten Lincoln Riley, 1-0 versus Kyle Whittingham, 1-0 versus Luke Fickle. I mean, some of the best coaches in college football he's been able to win a chess match against. And then Clark Lee, the coach at Vandy, ends up beating him, and does it with strategy, was as a tactician and a fantastic game plan. That is, I'm not gonna lie, that's rare, because Kalen DeBoer was on his way trending toward being a top 5 coach in college football. And right now people are going to question that, especially if they don't bounce back in a big way after that loss to Vanderbilt. That was one of the worst losses in Bama history, in the program's history. And now Kalen DeBoer's got to own that. Along with, I mean, how does that happen? How do you outsmart Sark and out coach Kirby Smart ended up losing a game to Vanderbilt and Clark Lee. And strategy. And I'll admit, in that game, he was out coached in that game. And Kevin DeBoer usually, like I said, is a chess master in those situations. But something to keep in mind about Diego Pavia, and you got to give Clark Lee credit for this. He went and got a lot of pieces from that New Mexico state staff. He got not only he got Tim Beck. He found his offensive coordinator Tim Beck and his quarterback Diego Pavia there, and his coaching mentor was there in Jerry Kill. And they basically that group was very very successful in Conference USA the year prior. They had the nation's number 12 offense in terms of yards per play. But then he basically took that think tank and brought it with him to the SEC. And I guess there's no doubt it's working because it worked versus Alabama, which nobody thought it would. So you got to give Clark Lee and Diego Pavia some credit for that. One of the other upsets, the Aggies pulled off a big upset, and their big upset is, I think, of note for Longhorn fans, just because Connor Wigman is back for them. Remember, Marcel Reed had led them to an undefeated record while he was a starter. And the thing to keep in mind was that I don't think Eli Drinkowitz thought Connor Wigman was going to play. A lot of quotes from him are saying that no way they would bench a winning quarterback to go back to a question mark in Connor Wigman. And I think he was wrong about that. And I wonder if that played a role in his team's preparation. That they prepared for Marcel Reed and not for Connor Wigman. But he looked really good. 18 of 22, 276 yards. And finally, a healthy Connor Wigman looked like the guy that had been hyped up in the preseason. Also, the run game looked good for the Aggies. They averaged over 6 yards a carry, actually over 6.5 yards per carry against Missouri. They had 6 sacks in that game. They had over a 40% havoc rate in that game versus Missouri. I mean, they really did. They had 44.7% havoc rate. Broke 19 to 61 plays. Missouri's O-line allowed a 35% pressure rate, and they only generated 1.1 rush yard before contact on average. So the Aggie defense came to play. Now, Missouri's offense could just be that bad. I think it's a little bit of both. Missouri's offense is struggling because they don't have a running game, and really they, as a passing offense right now, haven't really been able to find their groove. But also the Aggie defense was just really impressive with a lot of havoc plays. Remember last year they were really good at creating a lot of havoc plays and splash plays, and now you combine that with a quarterback like Connor Wigman with a high ceiling. Potentially now that Colin Klein offense is starting to figure some things out. He's way more compatible with that Colin Klein offense, and I thought they would change a lot. They didn't change that offense very much. Still a lot of zone reads, pin and pull counters. They didn't change a lot. They went with a lot of their staples, had some play action shots downfield and some vertical shots, but the offense looked very similar to what it looked under Marcel Reed. So maybe that's just what Colin Klein likes to do. And now the guys are becoming more familiar with his concepts and with what he likes to do on offense. So the Aggies pulled off, big upset there. And then there's the Arkansas win over Tennessee, which is also a bit shocking because they ended up losing their starting quarterback, Taylor Green, who's been pretty good this year. I think he's actually been fantastic for them in just what they need. They need a catalyst and a dynamic presence at quarterback. He is that. Really what worries me about Arkansas is the running backs they have. Jaquindon Jackson he didn't play great in that game, but he's averaging over 5.5 yards per carry. They have Braylon Russell, I think it's like a 6.
Oop, I think we lost Rod there for a minute. We'll have to see if we get Rod back. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, hopefully get Rod Babers back, and we'll continue on with what the facts and what the stats come back here on the Rodcast on a Monday morning here on the Horn. All right. Well, we've got one big fact for you right now is that Rod is still having some issues with his internet. So what we're going to do is I'm going to keep on the phone with him. We're going to try and troubleshoot and get him back on the air here going into 8 o'clock hour. Go back over some Cowboys football and their gutsy win over the Steelers last night. We will get into more Texans football and their last second win over the Bills. And of course, talk about the crazy weekend that was college football. We'll get into all of that and a whole lot more as we come back here on the Rodcast on a Monday morning here on the Horn with myself, Patrick Davis, and the great lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers coming back here on the Horn. Back in the Rodcast on a Monday morning. Rod's still having some technical difficulties, but we will try to get back to him as soon as possible, trying to work on some solutions over there as we keep it rolling here on a Monday morning. We'll get into some more talk about the NFL. The Texans win over the Bills, the Cowboys over the Steelers. We will get into a little bit more Cowboys talk in this hour. We'll also talk a little bit more about those big upsets that happened in college football. Probably the biggest, Arkansas over Tennessee, and of course, Vanderbilt over Alabama. Two big wins, showing you that this Texas schedule is not going to be as easy as we thought it might be, which leads to our big fat poll of the day today. The big fat poll of the day: which team with a top 10 upset still on the Texas schedule this season worries you the most? Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Kentucky, or Texas A&M? Which one of those schools, which one of those games now worries you the most? We know all of them have top 10 upsets on their resume now. They will be coming after Texas. You have to have that bullseye on your chest. Now, hopefully, that, of course, you're not playing any of these teams until you have two more big games with Oklahoma, of course, this weekend, then Georgia. But if you can get through those two games, you have Vanderbilt. Right now, the poll, A&M leading it with 60% of the votes. Arkansas second at 19%. Then Kentucky at 13%. And Vanderbilt at 7%. Still no love for Vanderbilt, even after a big win over Alabama, which, I mean, in reality, that was a win. That it was, Vanderbilt just played an almost perfect game. And I know that's kind of hyperbole, but they didn't turn the ball over. They didn't get the penalties in bad situations. They picked up third downs over and over again. They were able to make the most of turnovers. That interception off a tip ball where Jalen Milroe hits his receiver in the helmet and it pops off and it goes 6 the other way. Stuff like that just kind of all piled together. And, we talk about in that Texas-Mississippi State game that Texas was able to change the game plan for Mississippi State by getting the lead and scoring and moving down the field. And then Mississippi State had to start throwing the ball in the second half. Alabama never could get a lead. So when never having the lead means that Vanderbilt never had to change what their plan was. They were able to continue to run clock the entire second half. At some point, Alabama's offense needed to get going, and it never did. It felt like they were chirping the entire game. It just never felt like it was where it needed to be. We'll get more into that as we keep going. Let's get to the Horn headlines real quick, and then we'll keep talking about some Dallas Cowboys and their big win over the Steelers. I know people think that we are not the biggest Dallas Cowboys fans, but we do root for the Cowboys, and even when they play late at night, still rooting for a big gutsy win, and got to give some credit to a lot of people on that Cowboys team and staff for how that game turned out. But let's get to the Horn headlines before we get any further into the show. All right, your Horn headlines brought to you by Top Gun Rentals and Lawn Equipment. In the MLB playoffs, the divisional round began Saturday with all 4 series. The Guardians got a 7-0 victory over the Tigers, putting up 5 runs in the first. The Yankees rallied to beat the Royals 6-5, while in the NL, both series are even at 1-1. After the Phillies beat the Mets on Sunday, and the Padres got a big 10-2 win over the Dodgers. The AL will start their Game 2s today. In the NBA, all 3 Texas teams begin their preseason this evening, with the Rockets taking on the Jazz, the Mavericks facing the Grizzlies, and the Spurs going up against the Thunder. The regular season starts in 2 weeks on October 22nd. In college football, 6 top 25 teams were upset this weekend, including 4 in the top 10. Alabama, Tennessee, Missouri, Michigan, USC, and Louisville all lost, with Miami needing last-second heroics from Cam Ward once again to avoid an upset in their game against Cal. After the weekend, Texas regained the number 1 ranking heading into the Red River rivalry. And in the NFL, the Texans' Ka'imi Fairbairn hit a 59-yard field goal as time expired to get a 23-20 win over the Bills, while the Cowboys toughed out a 20-17 win over the Steelers on Sunday Night Football. An injury-depleted Cowboys defense night got worse when rookie Marshawn Nealon injured his knee and had to be carted off, but the team responding, limiting the Steelers to only 226 yards. Tonight, the Chiefs look to remain undefeated against the Saints. And that is your Horn headlines. All right, there's some Horn headlines for you. Let's get into a little talk about the Cowboys and that gutsy win that we had last night. Actually, I think we may get a Rob Babers return here, trying to make some things work. Let's see if I can get him pulled up here on, let's see if we can get all of these things working together and see if Rod, can you hear me?
I can hear you, brother. Can you hear me?
Can't hear Rod yet.
Okay.
Let me do that. Rod, all right, can we hear you now?
Can you hear me now?
No, cannot hear Rod right now. So we'll need to get him trying to figure out what he's got going on
How is that not?
on that one. But we will see if we can get there. I'm not sure where we're at on that, but let's talk a little bit about the Cowboys as we go into this. The Cowboys get a 2017 win last night. Dallas was able to hold on even with a rash of injuries. We knew that DeMarcus Lawrence was going to be out in that game. We knew that Micah Parsons was going to be out in that game, yet they were still able to pull it off. Marshawn Nealon gets injured his knee. He comes off the field, barely putting any weight on that knee, was having to come back off there
1, 2.
and go back and they get carted back to the locker room.
Test 1, 2.
But this Cowboys defense still played hard. Now you got a little bit lucky that a couple of the running backs for the Steelers were hurt. You had no Jalen Warren. You had no Cordell Patterson. They were both hurt in the game. However, so you had Najee Harris, who has not been great in the power run scheme. So in the run scheme, you had Najee Harris, who only runs for 3 yards in the 3 yards per carry in the game. They only get they get 92 yards on the ground. Justin Fields rushed for 27. You get a couple other runs, but they hold them to 134 yards in the air as well. That's secondary for the Dallas Cowboys defense has been really, really impressive in this game. They were able to shut down plays. They were able to go up and make big plays. And now we know this is a Justin Fields that isn't necessarily the best player to be able to come out and make big plays through the air. They felt that they had to, with Najee Harris not being able to get the yardage through the ground. And so it meant that you had to start throwing the ball. He didn't put the air under it. But, man, that secondary, Kalen Carson, who's been playing pretty well for them, was out. Deron Bland not back yet. Malik Hooker had some big plays, almost had a big interception in that game. But that secondary really put it together to be able to shut down Justin Fields, make them be able to go in and get played. I will say someone on there. Sorry. By the way, we're dealing with some technical difficulties if you're just tuning in. Rob Babers trying to get pulled in. So we may have to take a break a little bit early on this one so we can get back and get Rob back into the equation. I think we'll get it working here shortly. I think we may have a solution. But when we get into it, we'll go a little bit more about the Cowboys here. The Cowboys get that 20-17 win. What was really impressive about this team was you saw players that had to step up, make their biggest plays, make their biggest games of the season. Rico Dowdle averages 4.4 yards per carry, gets a couple of runs that are over 10 yards. We kind of been joking about that all season long. He goes 20 carries for 87 yards. He also gets a couple catches in there, another receiving touchdown that Rico Dowdle gets. He starts to become the guy because Deuce Vaughn listed inactive. Don't know if that was for injury or because of roster spots, but he's inactive. Ezekiel Elliott looked like he was in a lot of pain before the game. He goes 6 carries for 17 yards, doesn't look good at all in that game. And you need somebody to step up. You get Rico Dowdle to step up in that space and give you just enough on the run game that you're able to get it going. That defense is able to play just enough to slow down the run game, to make it to Justin Fields' passing game, and you can shut that down as well. Jalen Tolbert gets 7 receptions on 10 targets as they just keyed in on CeeDee Lamb, and Jalen Tolbert makes a big play, including that huge catch at the end of the game to take the lead. And then Jake Ferguson steps up. You need him to continue to step up. But you saw a lot of heart from a Dallas Cowboys team that there's questions. And, of course, the paydays make everybody worry. Is this team going to be too centered around guys that are making all the money? You worry about that defense. We heard a lot about it, guys playing hero ball, and they need to stop playing hero ball. And it felt like this is a team that really came together because they knew it was going to be a tough run with all of the injuries. It knew that it was going to be somebody that was a tough push for this Cowboys team to be able to make it a competitive game. with just the amount of injuries they had, and they just gutted it out, played team football. Mike Zimmer got the team ready on the defense, and I'll give credit to Mike McCarthy and this coaching staff. When you have a weather delay that was roughly 90 minutes, push the game back 90 minutes, everyone gets out there, gets warmed up. A lot of these guys trying to play in games where this is probably the biggest moment of their young careers, trying to play in these big moments where these guys maybe third-string practice squad guys getting called up to play in these games, and they were ready to go. Ready to play football for this Dallas Cowboys team and make the stops when they needed to. That's difficult to do, to get ramped back up for it. And, when you talk about it, there is something to be said about what this Cowboys team did. I believe we have Rod Babers joining us back. I believe he's got back. Rod, are we back on now?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Rod. Can you hear us?
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
the Lord. All right. I'm
sorry
no
about that, guys. And I apologize if I seemed distracted while I was trying to cover there.
He's doing 18 things at one time.
I'm trying to get Rod back on the air for you. I know you want to get Rod on, so there's some text messages and everything going on.
I'm like calling Patrick, and Patrick's calling me and texting while he's talking. So I apologize. That's my fault. The internet dropped in my house. I have no idea why I dropped like that. So I got Starlink or something. I could hit up Elon Musk. What's going on? I'm not going to throw my internet provider under the bus. I'm not going to throw them under the bus. I should throw them under the bus, but I will not. Okay. I'm not going to do that. Thank you, Patrick, for holding it down. That's why you're the real MVP. I appreciate that. I heard some of what you were talking about prior to us getting dropped off the air there. Like I said, thank you guys for sticking around. We had some technical difficulties, but the Cowboys, big win over the Steelers. I'm sure at this point you've kind of talked about the broad strokes there, yes, breaking down this matchup, but one of the things that impressed me really was all the different types of adversity the Cowboys had to face, right? This was a game that usually the Cowboys would find a way to lose, and there are a lot of excuses as to why they could have lost it. Hell, they were down to their 5th and 6th defensive ends. No Micah, no DeMarcus Lawrence, Sam Williams obviously out for the season. Then Marshawn Nealon ends up leaving early in that game with a lower leg injury of some kind. Tyler Guyton ended up having an issue, so he left. I think he had a sleeve on his leg at the end of the game, so we're not sure about the severity of his injury, but he left the game. Zach Martin left with cramps at one time. No Deron Bland, Kalen Carson. So basically your top 2 corners opposite Trevon Diggs were out in that contest too. And on top of that, Patrick mentioned the weather delay.
No. Did we lose him again? Oh, no.
Still.
Oh, he's back. Okay. You dropped him again real quick. We got a little internet problems.
Getting a little choppy. But still, it seems like the Cowboys, man, they just did not quit. A lot of grit from the Cowboys. I was a little surprised that the Cowboys were able to win a game like this. Usually this is a Mike Tomlin type game.
Yes.
These are the games that Mike Tomlin teams win. That's the whole point. Anytime you're under 20s, you're in Mike Tomlin territory. Then that game, he'll figure out a way to win a 1-score game. Nobody's better, actually, at winning 1-score games in the league. In the last 5 years, nobody's been better than Mike Tomlin at winning 1-score games. We said that last week. I said, man, you want to avoid, that a 1-score contest late against a Mike Tomlin team, and it was not the case. Big Dak energy. You saw that late in the game. He was able to put together the game-winning drive. What I think was a microcosm, really, of the Cowboys' efforts and how they performed in this game, the testicular fortitude that it took for them to win this game, is that it was actually Jalen Tolbert, career day, by the way, for Jalen Tolbert, 87 receiving yards, 7 receptions, had 40% of Dak's yards through the air came to, 40% of the team's air yards came via Jalen Tolbert. So he was making plays down the field for the team, and of course caught the game-winning touchdown on that play. And shout out to Tyler Smith. I've been looking for the audio and I cannot find it. I know it's out there, damn it. I know it's out there because I heard the audio. So I know it's out there. I heard it in the post game for the Cowboys. I've been trying to find it. So I'm going to find it for you so we can have some fun. But Tyler Smith, he when talking about the Jalen Tolbert game-winning touchdown, he got very graphic. He said, bro, it was miraculous. I mean, JT literally sprained his effing nuts. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. Sprained his nuts the play before, comes back, makes the game winner. Unbelievable. Yeah, I think it's actually called a testicular contusion. I believe it is when you sprain, the family jewels down there. All right, and yes, it is an actual real injury. And usually, as a man, I think we've all had some type of at least some trauma down there potentially at one point in your life. You don't come back easy. It takes more than like 40 seconds to come back from that. Right? But yeah, Jalen Tolbert, you remember like the play before. I don't know what happened in the back of the end zone. Dak targeted him, and he came up a little bit, gimpy, and he got nicked up down there. We have no idea what happened, but in the very, same drive, he came back to him, and on that drive, he caught the game-winning touchdown. Although he dealt with I'm sure, the agonizing, excruciating pain of a testicular contusion a couple of plays before. So in a nutshell, and that is not a pun intended, but I guess it is. The Cowboys, I think their gritty performance, that performance that showed you a lot of testicular fortitude, was summed up in Jalen Tolbert's performance and his game-winning touchdown, which happened whilst dealing with the pain from a testicular contusion.
Well done, sir.
Well done. Good for you, Jalen Tolbert. Good for you, man. You showed it off out there. Also, Rico Dowdle had 87 rushing yards. That was his. So basically, Jalen Tolbert had a career day for you, and Rico Dowdle had a career day for you. And I said last week, I said you got to give the keys to Dowdle. You know what I mean? You do. You got to just I know you got a committee of running backs, but Rico Dowdle at least gives you the best opportunity to make something happen back there, to have a guy that can take a 5-yard gain and turn it into a 15-yard gain. Even though going into this game, you hadn't had a running back have a run over 10 yards. Dowdle accomplished that for you. Patrick brought it up earlier. So you had Dowdle, who some growth in the running game for you. Also stepped up, had a big receiving touchdown, had over 100 yards from scrimmage total for Dowdle. That's big in terms of contributions from the backfield. Or Kevontae Turpin stepped up. It really was the other guys that stepped up for you. And I think I'll give Mike McCarthy credit. I think it was deliberate early on. Look at the scripted plays, the first 20 plays or so. They were trying to get the football to some of the other players. It's always the focus. But they tried to get the ball early on to Kevontae Turpin. I think he had 3 touches on the first 3 drives. And Jalen Brooks and Jalen Tolbert, intentionally, he was trying to get those guys the football and at least force Pittsburgh to have to recognize and acknowledge them and respect them as potential weapons, and it not just being the CeeDee Lamb show. And it wasn't. So give props to the Cowboys, man. A lot of guys stepped up. That was a must-win game for the Dallas Cowboys because it doesn't get easier. All right, going forward, you got Detroit coming up next. That's going to be a Herculean task to try to take down Detroit. It's one of the hottest teams in the NFL, but I did not see the Cowboys having enough wherewithal within themselves after all the injuries, and they become a mass unit, the weather delay, for them to step up and find a way to win that game on the road. 10 of 16 on 3rd and 4th down. So they were great on money downs. Dak, I know he had the 2 interceptions. One of those, I'll just say, was a miscommunication between him and CeeDee. The one he threw deep to Porter, the receiver probably should have fought for that a little bit more. Porter was able to kind of debo that receiver and snatch the football from him. But a really good play, probably a better play by the DB than a bad throw by Dak. But you still got, you got plenty of big Dak energy in this game, enough to find a way to pull it out in clutch time. So he had the clutch gene was on display for Dak in this contest. There's no doubt about that, especially at the end. But I think all throughout the game, even the poise he showed bouncing back from some of the bad plays that he made and having the Cowboys offense look clunky and having to go win an ugly game. That is a skill, to win an ugly game. The Pittsburgh Steelers have perfected it. You beat a team that majors in winning ugly games, and you beat them winning an ugly game. Blocked field goal. Think about it. Blocked field goal. You lost a turnover margin. You had the weather delay. You were down, 1 score with about 3 minutes left in that game. Found a way to win. I had, all the injuries, mash unit on offense and on defense. So that was a quality win for the Dallas Cowboys. It may not look like, and some Cowboys fans will question it, quality win, in my opinion. Oh, and also something else I suggested last week. I was like, you got to DeMarvin Overshown basically become a starter for you. If he's not going to start the game, he's got to be getting starting snaps or starting caliber snaps in terms of the amount that he plays. Yeah, I think basically Demo gave you starting snaps in that game. Demo and Eric Kendricks were your linebackers and got more, in my opinion, got more rotation than any other two linebackers in your linebacking core. So I think Demo may be now being pushed into that role of being a starter for the Cowboys, and he should. He's dynamic. He's hungry. He runs sideline to sideline. He adds some juice to that Cowboys defense. So some of the things that I just think were common sense for the Cowboys at this point in the season may have helped them win that game. Rico Dowdle, more Rico, more DeMarvion Overshown out there. Demo actually dropped a pick. Probably should have had a pick late in that game too. And then at least now you know who your third wide receiver is. Jalen Tolbert. He stepped up and showed you. Hey, that's your number 3 wide receiver. Remember, that was a question we had during training camp and for the first part of the season. Who's the number 3 guy? With Brandon Cooks being out, you figured out, okay, Jalen Tolbert's our number 3 guy. When Brandon Cooks come back, you're 3 deep at wide receiver now. When you weren't, I don't think, 3 deep at wide receiver prior to the Brandon Cooks injury. So you found out something about yourself, right? You got a chance to, what they always say about football doesn't build character, it reveals it. That you revealed something about yourselves as a Cowboys team. I think this Cowboys team has got some grit, and they got some guys, some of the other players who are willing to step up and can make some plays in big games, like a Jalen Tolbert, like a Rico Dowdle. And I thought the defensive ends, considering you were down your top 4 defensive ends going into this game, I thought Chauncey Golston and Tyrus Wheat and Carl Lawson ended up playing good for you in that circumstance. You actually had a higher pressure rate than the Steelers did. You had TJ Watt on the other side. You had a higher pressure rate than they did in that game. So yeah, just that watching that game, I thought, man, the Cowboys are going to find a way to lose this game. And no, they battled back. Even down the goal line, things didn't always go their way. Right? When they marched all the way down there for the game-winning drive. And then what happens early on? Right? Pittsburgh still started making plays at the goal line. That great play by Roberts. We jumped over like Superman, jumps over the line of scrimmage and hits Rico Dowdle. Literally times it out perfectly to hit. He times it out and predicts where Rico Dowdle is going to try to jump to try to, leap across the line of scrimmage into the end zone. And he times it out perfectly and meets Rico Dowdle in the hole, jars the ball loose. I thought, matter of fact, y'all need to give Dak some credit. Didn't Dak recover that? If Dak doesn't recover, Steelers recover that. That was another Dak play that was underrated that really did save the game. That was a big Dak play. Because I remember seeing that ball squat out. I'm like, ooh, that was if Dak didn't immediately see it or if he's distracted doing something else, Pittsburgh Steelers get that ball, game over. And that was another thing. The Cowboys didn't fold in that moment. They didn't panic. They just ended up, making the right plays. And they pushed them back. They were like on the goal line. They pushed them back like 4 or 5 yards. Might help them out, honestly. Might give them a little bit more space. Think about that drag route. That drag route wouldn't have cleared the way it did if they had been a little closer to that, to the end zone. So either way, no excuse. That was a no excuse game for the Cowboys. That was the excuses are like, you know what? Everybody's got them. That was one of those games where everybody would have given the Cowboys an excuse to lose. The Cowboys had injuries. Oh, the weather delay. Oh, they couldn't do this, that. On the road, Pittsburgh, Mike Tomlin. Nope. The Cowboys didn't accept any excuse. Go find a way to win the damn game. And they did. It ain't got to look pretty. This ain't college football. It ain't got to look pretty. It just got to find a way to get the dub. Just win, baby. As the late, great Al Davis would say. And the Cowboys did that. So props to the Cowboys. That was an impressive win. I'll admit, I did not see this Cowboys team being able to pull out a game like that with so much adversity up against them. The other, did we get to the horn headlines? I'm sorry, because I was off.
Yes.
So I apologize. All right, got to the horn headlines. So I want to make sure that we stay on time. So since we get to the horn headlines, let's take the break. Let's get to the burnt orange curtain on the other side, and we'll talk Texas, Oklahoma. We'll also throw in conversation about all the big upsets over the weekend. There was a belief that it would be a rather quiet college football weekend. That was not the case. You had history made with all of the upsets, especially in the SEC. We'll discuss that. Also, we'll talk Texas, Oklahoma. What's the game plan going into the Texas-Oklahoma game? And I have a factoid for you. I got a stat for you since I wasn't with you for what the stats. I got a factoid for you, a trend that heavily favors Texas in this matchup versus Oklahoma. We'll have that when we come back as well. All of that and more right here on the Rodcast featuring Patrick Davis. I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Davis. Coming back on the Horn. All right, welcome back to the Rodcast. Thank you guys for sticking with us through our technical difficulties there. I apologize about that. Thanks to my man Patrick, always holding it down. He's why he's the real MVP. That, by the way, stuff like that happens once a show, and usually it doesn't take me off the air, but it's some crisis that Patrick has to deal with, like some fire alarm going off or something crazy happening.
Oh,
And usually he deals with it with great professionalism, and you don't even know that something's off the rails because Patrick is so good at his job. That time, that's all me because my internet dropped it. Then I left Patrick out there by himself, but that's why he's clutch, coming up clutch for us like Kobe. So we appreciate Patrick and everything he does. All right, let's talk about the college football weekend. And I think there's some lessons to be learned for the Longhorns in that college football weekend. There's no doubt about that. And one thing I thought, and I've always, I've always heard this from coaches, and so now I've taken it to heart as well. When you're watching the film on yourself, or watching a film on yourself or any team, upcoming opponent, watching film on yourself, watching your own team, practice doesn't matter. It applies to watching football film. And I think it actually now applies in this situation too. It's never as good as you think, and it's never as bad as you think. And it's so true. Like when I watch games and I was like, man, I played like ish. Oh, man, I hate watching this film. Coach is gonna bring me. I'm gonna get lit up in this film session because I just had a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad game. And then you go in and you realize, like, actually, I had like 3 or 4 plays that were bad. The rest of it wasn't that bad, actually. Now looking back on it, and coach gets on you and criticizes you for those plays, but you realize, like, oh, actually, it wasn't that bad. And then there's some games you go in there, you're like, man, I played like an All-American. I played such a great game. I mean, coach is gonna praise me for like an hour and a half straight in this film session because I had so many great plays and I was at the top of my game. And then you go back and watch the film, you realize like I've had like 5 or 6 really good plays, but a lot of those plays were subpar. A lot of my plays, coach pointed out that my technique was off here, fundamentals out here, loafed a couple of plays here, didn't think about it. Damn, I thought I had a good game, but actually wasn't that good. And sometimes it's on the coach, right? He knows you coming in there thinking you got a good game, so he's going to criticize you. He criticizes you a little bit more on games where you had great games, and he probably is a little less critical when you had a bad game. Could be that too, but it's never as good as you thought. Never as bad as you thought. I think that applies to the SEC this season. It's not as good as we thought, but it's not as bad as we thought either. All the teams that we thought would be bottom dwellers in the SEC, your Kentuckys and your Vanderbilts and your Arkansas is in that conversation now too. Right? These are the teams that people thought, oh man, these teams are going to be bad teams in the SEC. They'll be bottom dwellers. Not necessarily the case. And some people thought that about the Aggies. Some of y'all Longhorn fans thought that about the Aggies. Oh, the Aggies will be trashed. They'll be terrible. They'll barely make a bowl game. Well, Aggies are 3-0 in the conference right now. Only team that's 3-0 in the conference. Vanderbilt just pulled off the biggest upset in the history of their program. And Arkansas, well, looks like Arkansas is going to be a problem potentially. And their only losses have been by 1 score in overtime and another 1 score loss to the Aggies, and they pulled off a big upset win over Tennessee. So they're going to be like, and in Kentucky with the big win over Ole Miss. Goes back to Patrick's topic for the big fat poll of the day, which is which one of the upcoming opponents for Texas who has a top 10 upset win on their schedule gives you, the most anxiety. Which one stresses you out the most? And all those teams, think about it, they got those big wins, except for Kentucky, right? Those big wins were at home for them this past week. I'm not sure where that Kentucky win was at, actually. That wasn't in Ole Miss, was it? Was that at Kentucky? I got to look that up. My point is, Kentucky don't worry about that because Kentucky is on the road. They got to play Texas at DKR. But the rest of those teams, they got those big wins at home. They got them at home. Vanderbilt got that at home. Arkansas, Texas A&M with their big win over Missouri, that was at home. Now, that technically they were ranked 25th. Missouri is still a top 10 team.
Kentucky won at Ole Miss.
That's really impressive, actually. So I guess that now you're stressing about that because they put up their top 10 win was on the road and they got to play you on the road. So the point is, none of those teams are as bad as you thought. As a matter of fact, they are a whole lot better than you thought. And all of those teams now with those top 10 wins over top 10 teams, upsets over top 10 teams, and that Kentucky went on the road. Actually, I'm adding them to the mix now too. They believe they can beat Texas. I don't believe they can beat Texas, but they do now. Vanderbilt, after beating number 1 ranked Alabama, believes they can beat Texas. And Arkansas hates Texas more than they love themselves, so they always believe they can beat Texas. And Kentucky with that win on the road and Ole Miss at the Grove, oh yeah, they're feeling it. And A&M was probably as confident as they've been in a couple of years about how they're playing right now in the SEC on the Elko. So that's for Longhorns. That is a little bit of the danger going forward. Now you still got to play. Still, Georgia is still a big dog. The big dogs are not as formidable as we thought. Your Georgias, your Bamas, your Tennessee. Are they still really good? Yeah, really good. Really good, potentially great teams. But I do think ultimately that competitive level, it'll even out. But it's just that I think there are no pushovers in the SEC right now. I think we all assume Vanderbilt might be a pushover. Mississippi State, you want to say that was a pushover? He played with you for 3 quarters. I don't know if you can call him a pushover. You did beat him by three touchdowns, but I don't know if any Longhorn fan would go, nah, that was a pushover. It's like, nah, we called it more of a wake-up call than we called it a pushover.
No, but I mean, that was the concept. I talked about this a minute ago, but the reason Vanderbilt was able to keep doing what they did, Mississippi State would have done what Vanderbilt did to Texas if Texas couldn't get an offense going. Like if Texas could never get the scores, Mississippi State would have kept running the football and just kept eating up clock. It was just by the fact that Texas had that little bit of run and got a big enough lead that it meant Mississippi State had to throw the ball, and that threw everything off. Vanderbilt never really had to break away from what they were trying to do because Alabama's offense never got going.
And he would get more chunk yardage plays on Bama, though.
They were.
That's something Mississippi State didn't get a lot of. Every now and then they'd get a chunk play.
Yeah.
But, man, Vandy was getting chunk yardage plays on shovel passes. And
they ran that same play twice. Twice they ran it.
And it was a nice play because he had multiple options. You know, obviously he was a running option, but then they gave him a pitcher man, and then they gave him a little shovel man underneath, and he was brilliant at being able to identify, you know, which defender had what responsibility. You got to give props to Diego Pavia, man. He did. That was a really good game plan by them, and it worked to perfection. But my point is, and by the way, I'm not worried about Vanderbilt pulling off another upset like that because I think programs who are building like Vandy's building, and I think Clark Lee's doing a good job. You don't usually hear about them pulling off 2 of those per season. It's usually 1. They don't really have the bandwidth and the wherewithal, the emotional, right? That kind of the emotional aptitude, if you will, to have that many big time upsets in one season. And they won't be able to surprise anyone. Texas won't take them for granted like Alabama probably did. Just won't happen. So
they don't have that many goalposts either.
Yeah, they got something else they didn't put into the budget. Like, damn it, we have to replace the goalpost. We're happy to have to do it, but damn it, we didn't put that in the budget. Hey, gonna find some booster.
Hey, someone go dig them out of the water.
Right. I don't even know if they knew where to take them. It's like, when's the last time Vandy had to carry off a goalpost?
I know where they did. They carried it down Broadway on Nashville, and they threw it into the river.
It always goes to the river.
It always goes in the river.
What does the city do with these goalposts that end up in the river? Like, what do they do with them? What do they do? Do you just repurpose them? Like, what do you repurpose? I guess it's just metal. You can just repurpose.
You just walk in on Monday morning and you're like, "We're going to the river, aren't we?" Like, yep, going to the river, like, pulling them goalposts back out.
And do they take them up? Do the fans take them apart somehow too? I know they get it out of the ground and dig it. Do they take it apart? Like, can you take it apart in different parts?
I have no idea. I saw the video. I saw the video of them carrying it down Broadway.
I know,
and it was still all connected.
It's still attached.
Yeah. It looked like it was bent in a little bit, and then I saw the video of them throwing into the river, and it was still looked like it was full.
It's I'm amazed that they're able to get those things out. They can work together to do it.
Yeah,
like usually you can't get even kids to work together, and you have to get like these hundreds of teenage kids to work together to destroy and detach the field goal, the goalpost, and then all of them down there take it down to the river, wherever the hell the river is, and that was dump it in there.
You saw Arkansas; they win their game, and the crew runs out and takes the goalpost down immediately. They just ran out and were like, "It's coming down, so get it down." Like,
get it down now. We don't want people we don't want them hanging on it, climbing up it. Yeah. It's coming down anyway. Let's just take it down, and then we'll whatever. Now, when they take it down, they can't stop the kids from taking it away.
I think, but once they took it down, it kind of took the fun out of it.
I know, because
they probably put
the danger of it. But the danger of it, I think, is trying to bring it down because they're like hanging off of it and rocking on it and stuff. It's like, well, what if it falls down onto other people? Then it's no longer fun and we're liable. So let's just take it down and then we'll just let them take it.
Yeah, I think they probably also had a little bit of security just around the goalpost to be like, hey, don't do this. Go, you're fine here. Just don't do this.
The security was not keeping the kids from coming on the field because they just ran. They did not stop them at all. There was no deterrent. They ran right on the field. I was like, whoa. Usually you see like a little pause and it's like security trying to stop it.
You see the security that's like the hourly brought in security that doesn't even get a badge. They get a t-shirt.
They're the ones. I ain't paying enough money for this. Yeah. Like, I'm not paying enough money for this.
Right.
So I'll keep my hands like this to make it look like I'm doing my job.
I'm going to get a lawsuit trying to stop you.
But that is also a lesson, Longhorns. You do not want a team rushing the field on you.
No.
All right. That is also part of it. It happened to Tennessee. It happened to Alabama. You don't want them rushing the field on you. All right. You don't want that happening. All right. And the Aggies didn't rush the field. Good for you, Aggies. You need to rush the field. You're beating the hell out of Missouri. You expect to do that. But I'll say this for the Longhorns. It's always going to be a challenge when you have to face your rival at their place. And your rivals, that game now at your rival's place just became a lot more hostile and became a lot tougher. And think about it, Arkansas didn't have a win like that. I don't know if they believe they can beat Texas. Now they believe it. And A&M's probably starting to believe they can beat Texas. So Texas didn't have a lot of games where they had to go to their rival's place in recent years because your Texas OU game is always at the Texas, obviously at the State Fair. So that's still a hostile environment, but a little different than being in enemy territory. The test this year will be going to enemy territory, and those being the most hostile environments you're going to be in, and those teams actually being formidable. And on top of that, those teams believing they can beat you. And we discussed this possibility at the beginning of the year, and most Longhorn fans did not want to talk about it because I remember the Longhorn fans saying, shut up, this is not realistic. But we'll see. I don't know how realistic it is or realistic it will be in like a month from now. But right now, ladies and gentlemen, the Aggies control their destiny in the SEC. The A&M is the only 3-0 team in the SEC. They're not the only undefeated team. They're the only 3-0 team in the SEC. And Texas and LSU are the other undefeated teams in the SEC, but they're only 1-0. A&M is 3-0. So we'll see. They, like I said, control their own fate right now in the SEC title game. We haven't looked at tiebreakers. We ain't at that point yet. But interestingly enough, we did discuss the possibility that the Aggies would be at it past Missouri. Once they get past this point in the season, where would they be? And if they can get past this point unscathed in SEC play, they would have a very favorable schedule for the rest of the way. And they do. Because their next toughest game is LSU, and they got LSU at home. And really, they'll be favored in every game until they play Texas. They'll be favored in the rest of them until they play Texas. Now, that is interesting. That's because that LSU, we'll see. I think that'll be their next big test. But right now, the Aggies are playing, at least in that last game versus Missouri, some of the best football we've seen them play in the last few years. It was a statement game for the Aggies. But here's a stat for the Longhorns in that Texas OU game, because that's where the Longhorns' focus is. And the Sooners had a bye week before this Texas OU game, as did Texas, and that's rare. Can't think the last time that's happened. So both teams are going to have a little something up their sleeve. There'll be a way that both teams break precedent in this game. But Texas has a huge advantage. Well, they got a lot of advantages, but the biggest advantage may just be quarterback. You got your third-year starting quarterback who's starting this game for Texas, and Quinn Ewers, who's coming off the injury, but he should be fresh, and he's come off injury before in the Texas OU game. But the quarterbacks with more experience in the Texas OU game, when a quarterback comes in into this matchup with more experience, since 1990, all right, so since 1990, the team's quarterback with more experience is 16-5-1. The quarterback with more experience. That's Quinn. It plays a huge role because of the momentum shifts in the game, because of the emotional charge and volatility of the environment. It's such a unique environment. It can shell shock a young quarterback at times too. Like, whoa, this is a lot. stands split down the middle. The momentum swings are so drastic. I talk about this all the time. Usually, a stadium is, in a road, you're on a road environment or you're home. So it's either your crowd or their crowd. And the momentum shifts are, in my opinion, they're not as drastic when you're on the road. They don't feel as drastic when you're either at home or on the road. Something about that environment when the stands are split, when the stands are 50-50, the momentum swing seems so drastic because you can feel there's a surge and the adrenaline and the energy of the crowd and the fans who are excited about whatever play just had that's helping their team. And then you also, at the same time, the disappointment is palpable from the other side. You can hear and feel their disappointment and anguish. And usually you don't have that. Usually it's one or the other. And it's all one or the other. So now I'm saying the momentum shifts feel even more drastic. And that's why you cannot, and this is why Coach Sark, he learned that lesson too. And I think Venables learned it as well. That's why both of these coaches having experience coaching in this game, it does matter. Because I've said this before, you cannot allow an opponent to monopolize momentum in this game. You let them have momentum for too long and it turns into a snowball. And you'll be on the downside of that thing. It'll roll right over you. I've been on the downside of it before. and you don't have to be a bad team. But
no,
the momentum can just overwhelm you.
Year one Texas. Year one Texas with Sark.
Yeah, look at the momentum shifts, right? It happened, boom. And then it was, and then once it starts one way, because it's so drastic, it can just have a snowball effect and it can roll right over you. And that Sark realized that though. So watch, you see how the way Sark coaches his game. He coaches it very differently than he did in year one. And Venables did too. Last year was a great example of both of the coaches understanding that fact that you cannot allow an opponent to monopolize the momentum. Think about the trick plays they threw in there and the fake. There's some fakes in there early on in the game, and when the way Sark answers offensively with really high pass rates, he's throwing the ball early because they're just trying to answer. You have to answer. You cannot allow a team to start gathering momentum without answering. And that's a big part of the game. And that's why I think having that veteran quarterback helps, because the veteran quarterback also understands that too. Like, whoa, we got to answer this momentum snatching play they just had or drive they just had. We got to answer it. We have to. Otherwise, we could end up being on the downside of that momentum swing. And that's why I think since 1990, the quarterbacks with the more experience. Now, last year was not, because last year Dylan Gabriel didn't have more experience, ended up winning the game. So it didn't happen every time. But most of the time, the quarterback with the more experience will have the advantage and will win this matchup. And I think for Quinn, it's going to play a huge role in the way that he handles the adversity that's inevitable in this game. It'll come in some way, form, or fashion. It may be early, it may be late. Hopefully, it's early, and then Texas can pull away later from Oklahoma. But I remember last year he faced adversity. He threw 2 picks early on in the game, and we thought, oh man, this could be a downward spiral for Quinn. And no, he was able to reset, gather himself, and then able to bounce back, and then had one of the best performances in the Texas OU game in the last 3 quarters we've seen from any quarterback. And that's also too, because you're going to face adversity, and you got to keep yourself from going, it turning into quicksand and a downward spiral. And the way you do that is you obviously rely on your experience, and you rely on, your lessons you've learned as a quarterback in this situation. If you don't have those, you panic and go, what the hell, man? I don't really know what to do. Quinn knows what to do. He throws a pick, and like, I threw a pick before. I did it before. It's okay. I'll bounce back. I know I can come back and make a play after that. So that's why that's the first big advantage for Texas. There'll be a bunch of them we mentioned all throughout the week, but that's the first big advantage. And especially going up against that Oklahoma defense matters more, because what are the 2 things that Oklahoma's defense feeds on? They feed on negative plays and they feed on takeaways. If you can keep them from getting able to force turnovers, and you can keep them on their side of the line of scrimmage from getting negative plays, sacks, and tackles for loss, you will beat this Oklahoma defense. They're not a sound defense. They're not a defense that has that are structurally and fundamentally sound, in my opinion. I think they're just a havoc-minded playmaking defense. And if you can protect the passer and protect the football against Oklahoma, you'll win comfortably. And a veteran quarterback who's played in this game has a better chance of protecting the football and from avoiding those negative plays, which Quinn knows and can do. All right, we come back. We'll get into Off the Record on the other side right here on the Rodcast featuring Patrick Davis. I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Davis coming back on the horn. All right, welcome back to the Rodcast. Time to get to a little off the record here. Nick Saban, the GOAT, has become an analyst for ESPN. I actually like Nick Saban's work. I think he does a really good job, actually. I think he gives you really good insight, and he's not afraid to give an opinion. Like, he'll just give you like a straight up opinion or hot take. And I think that's the toughest thing for coaches who are making that transition to do. Sometimes they feel like, I don't want to disrespect the other coaches, and I don't want to, I still think they have like this gentleman's code among the coaches where they don't want to criticize other coaches. But Nick Saban does it I think he walks that line. He does it in a respectful way, throwing it out there. But
I think also he knows he ain't coming back to coaching. And a lot of these other coaches are like, well, I may need a job later and I may go back.
That's fair.
Nick Saban's like, I'm done.
That is true. Yeah, and if I did want to coach, y'all gonna hire me because I'm Nick Saban. So I guess it doesn't matter anyway.
I ain't working for you. You working for me.
Yes, yeah, the other guys, they're still looking for jobs. Great point there. So they got to be a little careful with what they say and how critical they are. So Nick Saban, he during the offseason, he was talking about Vanderbilt. Actually, he was talking about SEC and home environments in the SEC and why it's a tough conference is because the road games are, all tough, hostile environments. You got rich tradition, these places, rich football tradition. So it's just really tough to go on the road and play. And we just got done talking about Vanderbilt getting the upset at home, the Aggies getting the upset at home, Arkansas getting the upset at home. Tougher places to play, especially when you're talking about those emotionally charged environments. So one of the things that Nick Saban said earlier this year when talking about those road environments, he said basically every place in the SEC is a tough place to play, except for the Vanderbilt Commodores. Here is that little audio of Nick Saban earlier this year.
But the only place you play in the SEC that's not hard to play is Vanderbilt. Because when you play at Vanderbilt, you have more fans there than they have. And that's no disrespect to them. It's just the truth.
And see, he just keeping it real. Well, when keeping it real goes wrong happened over the weekend when Vanderbilt pulled off the biggest upset win in the history of their program. They beat the #1 team in the country for the first time in their program's history. And when they were rushing the field, getting ready to tear down those goalposts, there was some very smart video board operator who had it. I don't know if he had it ready at the time or during the game. If he was like, dude, we're going to beat Alabama. I got to get that damn clip. I'm pretty sure maybe that was probably how it happened. But if he had that clip ready before the game, kudos to you, brother, because you saw it coming, because they played that clip while the fans were rushing the field several times to throw it back at Nick Saban's face. He said Vanderbilt, the only easy place to play in the SEC. Well, not for Bama, it wasn't, damn it. Not for Bama. No, and officially, there's no easy place to play in the SEC.
What's funny is he wasn't really wrong in the fact that Alabama had a ton of people there.
They did.
They had a ton of people there, and it's by far the smallest stadium in the SEC.
Yeah. Hey, still pretty damn sweet.
It is. No, I get it. It's hilarious. But because we were watching that, and I'm like, Texas is gonna have that place. There are going to be a lot of Texas people because it's in Nashville.
Yeah, if you want to go.
Because it's just a better town. Like, it's one of those towns to visit that you go, oh, no, we can go down and then hang out in Nashville for a day or two and enjoy the weekend. And so we'll go to the game. The tickets probably aren't ridiculously expensive like some of the other places where you have to buy it out. Now, they're probably more now than they were. They're probably cost more Monday than they cost on Friday for that Texas Vanderbilt game. But I think there'll be plenty of people, but yeah, it is. You're going to get things like that are going to come back to get you. But Nick Saban also, I wasn't wrong, Kalen.
Yeah,
Mr. DeBoer, I was not wrong.
I cannot believe. Yeah, Kalen DeBoer. Yeah, I mean, I still think he's a great coach, but it is strange that he's got wins. He's basically undefeated against Dan Lanning, Steve Sarkisian, Kirby Smart, Lincoln Riley, Kyle Whittingham, and Luke Fickell, some of the best coaches in college football, and yet he's 0 for 1 against Clark Lee and Vanderbilt.
Clark Lee the whole time too. Every interview he did, he was like just trying not to jinx it. Like every interview, they kind of just play football, man. Shut up. No one say anything.
Don't talk about it. It's true. I'm with him because he's probably like, I thought my game plan was a good one. I didn't think it was this damn good.
He's like, were we real? Is this happening right now?
Yeah, 42 minutes of time of possession. That's real. That is. Like I said, that is as lopsided as it gets, and that's the biggest reason why they end up winning this contest versus Alabama. Vanderbilt went 12 of 18 on third down. You talked about that. They ran 75 plays in that game against Alabama. 75 plays.
And man, it's not good when Alabama kept talking trash. The entire game was talking trash, and you're like, man, they can just scoreboard you. Over and over, they can scoreboard you.
Over and over. Oh, man. Yeah, you're right. Was it Malachi Moore who had the meltdown multiple times in that game? That wasn't a good look. That's bad optics, man. Bad optics. I mean, I guess he's just not used to losing, but still. That was ugly. Didn't he kick the ball at the end of the game, too?
I think so,
They set the ball, and they came and kicked it. He was having a temper tantrum on the field. Like he's had a temper tantrum at the end of the game. He just couldn't believe he was getting beat by Vanderbilt. No, but that does happen. Who was the Longhorn that was on the field like crying when they lost to Kansas? It was like, I don't know what a name, but it was like a Longhorn like crying on the field when they lost to Kansas and literally crying like a child, like he was like on the ground, pounding the ground, like, no, we lost to Kansas. I was like, I get it. Like, I get it.
No, because he knew he couldn't go home anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I lost again. So it's like, oh no, there's no shame in losing, but losing to Kansas in football, there's shame in that. There's no shame in losing, but losing to Vanderbilt when you're the #1 team in the country, there is shame in that. So he just felt shame. That's all. Like, Game of Thrones, they should have a bell. Shame. Because trust me, when you lose to a team you're not supposed to lose to, who's the most shameful opponent I lost to? Trying to think about this where I actually felt shame. Maybe it wasn't like that, but North Carolina State we lost to, and we had like 3 blocked punts in the same game.
Ooh.
That was shameful. That was shameful. It was like we can't even learn how to do this is a basic task in football to just punt, to just punt block, to just set up a punt.
You just go back and watching the film and like, it's still 11 players. Really thought there was 12 on that.
Yeah. Oh, seriously, we're just. I think this. I think honestly, I want to say one player had 2 blocks. If I'm not mistaken, it was Terrence Holt. Maybe then Terrence Holt, maybe Torrey Holt's little brother.
Whoever it is, I guarantee he tells that story still.
Oh, I guarantee he does. That was my moment where I want to throw a temper tantrum on the field, where I feel like, how are we losing this game? What is wrong with us? Like that kind of thing. So I know I empathize with the Flair situation. You can't do that though. You gotta hold that in. Yeah, it's the guy that for Texas who was crying or whatever. That's different. Even Malachi Moore was actually literally going after the opposing team.
Yeah,
like going after the opposing players, like kicking the football. You can't be having a grown man temper tantrum like that. But that reflects poorly on Kalen DeBoer. Is my point.
Yes,
like it reflects poorly on him. It's like seems like those guys are a lot less disciplined and buttoned up than when that, of course, but a lot less disciplined and buttoned up than when Nick Saban was there. Almost to the point where of course, now it's worrisome because you lost to Vanderbilt. But maybe now people are gonna start looking a little bit deeper at some of those details of the Kalen DeBoer program. But I still think Kalen DeBoer is a hell of a coach. I just don't know how the hell you beat Sark 2 times, twice, and then can't beat Clark Lee or Vanderbilt. All right, we come back. We'll get into some of the other NFL news, notes, and nuggets. We'll talk about the Texans and their big win over the Bills. More about the Cowboys and their win that showed a lot of fortitude from them and a lot of grit. And we'll also talk more college football. Texas OU week. It is 9:05 and OU still sucks. Right here on the Rodcast featuring Patrick Davis and Lifetime Longhorn Rod Rivers coming back on the horn. Welcome back to the Rodcast. It is a It is a Smooth Soul Monday, as we like to call it. That's when Patrick plays jams intended to soothe the tortured soul of sports fans who might have had a really tough weekend. Man, if you're getting ready for Monday and you got meetings, of course, you're probably sitting in some traffic, getting ready to go to work, and maybe you got some calls and some adulting to do. That can be really stressful, especially when you're coming off a stress-free, relaxing, fun-filled weekend. Hopefully that was the case for each and every one of you. And in order to make that a smooth transition from the weekend to the work week, Patrick makes it a Smooth Soul Monday. So we appreciate him hooking us up there.
I'll tell you this. I could probably give you 20 guesses on what country this band is from, and you would never get it.
I don't even know if I've ever heard this song before, actually. What is the song? What's the name of the song?
The name of the song is Love of Your Own.
Love of Your Own.
I don't even tell you what the name of the band is, and unless you know where this band is from, you wouldn't know where it is. The band is Average White Band, who does Pick Up the Pieces, Cut the Cake, those songs.
Oh, yeah. I'll say that don't sound like an Average White Band either. So good for them.
No, but they are Scottish. That is a band from Scotland.
That group is from Scotland.
Yes.
Why don't I hear like accents or anything?
I don't know, but they are. And it's one of the craziest things. And I had forgotten about that fact until recently, and then someone pointed out, and I was like, "You're right, they are."
I'm serious. Like, why don't I? I don't know. That's wild. And how many albums does the Average White Band have?
They've got quite a few.
Like
I mean, they're all funky. I mean, so Pick Up the Pieces by which is very famous song. Here, I'm gonna play a little bit for you.
I'm sure I've heard it. I don't know if I can.
That one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's Average White Band.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I know the song. So their genre is funk then.
Yeah, they're like funk and.
Yeah. I did not know they were from Scotland.
Scottish funk band.
Nope. Did not know that. I would assume the Average White Band was some white guys.
Yeah.
Just from the name.
I think there is a black guy in the band, but I don't.
Well, I'm sure. Yeah, there you go. I'm sure it's not all white guys, but average white guys, I'm sure, make up most of it.
Yes.
It'd be pretty wild if they did that. Like one white guy and the rest black dudes called Average White Band. But I did not know they were from Scotland. That's crazy. And who knows that soul had made its way to Scotland, like the genre.
I know. Right? Yeah. So, I think it was there's just guys that were like the music and then wrote these songs. And then I think they eventually got a singer because they didn't have a singer for a while. Really, they didn't do.
Is the brother the singer? The black dude?
I
believe
so.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense too as to why they sound a bit urban. I guess is the term you want to say. I was like, they sound like that. Okay, there you go.
Urban. The term when I was working for a radio station and we added we added a hip hop or a soul. We added something, and we were doing production, and then they were like, "This commercial needs a urban voice." Like, cool, thanks. All right.
Oh no, I've heard. I guess I worked in radio long enough to know that term. Urban.
This needs an urban voice. Oh, so not me. All right, gotcha. Not me is what you're saying. I got you.
They don't want an average white man for this part. That's why they want urban, please. Yeah, when you see that in the description of like whatever the job title or the posting, urban is like urban. Yeah. They're trying to tell you something there. Yeah. I don't even know if you need to use that term anymore. They still use it, or does everybody know what it means now?
I think everybody knows what it means. They still use it.
Everybody knows it, and they still use it, so they don't even get over there. All right, there you go. Learn something new. I appreciate about Patrick all the musically themed days of the week. I did not know the Average White Band was from Scotland. There you go. You can. I definitely win some trivia somewhere with that. Patrick also comes up with the topic for the big fat poll of the day, which is already posted, and it is a great conversation starter, as they always are. Patrick, give the folks the topic for the big fat poll of the day.
Big fat poll of the day. Which team with a top 10 upset still on the Texas schedule this season worries you the most? Vanderbilt,
close.
Arkansas, Kentucky, and Texas A&M. First of all, it's crazy there's 4 of them still on the schedule.
That's crazy. That's right.
It's crazy that Georgia is not one of them. And now it's upset kind of makes you. Georgia technically does have a win over a team that is top 10 right now. It was not an upset at the time, but Clemson is number 9 number 10 in the country right now.
Yeah, Clemson's been rolling. Ever since we forgot about Clemson.
Georgia beat the crap out of Clemson in week 1. So they do have a win over a top 10 team currently, but it wasn't top 10 at the time We say top
And
10
it
upset over
wasn't
top 10.
an upset win. Yeah.
Yes.
That's a good point.
But upset wins over top 10 teams. Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Kentucky, and A&M. Right now, 62% still says Texas A&M. And then everybody else kind of splitting it. 18% for Arkansas, 11% for Kentucky, and 9% for Vanderbilt.
Yeah, this is the only reason I agree with you about the Aggies. I think the Aggies, they are formidable, and you got to realize that's that's going to be like a religious experience for them. That's going to be like an out of body experience for the fans and for the players. Going to have an emotional charge. There's so much competitive hatred. It's going to be palpable. Texas has not experienced anything like. I don't know if Texas had a hostile environment like that in years. Arkansas, they went to a few years ago. It's not going to be anything close to what Texas A&M will be. And if they're good, oh man, I can't even imagine how wild and crazy those A&M fans are going to be. So I just don't know if Texas, the program, has experienced a hostile environment like that in a while. So that'll be a bit shocking. And like I said, the Aggies might be good. Just that'd be simple. We on the 3-0 right now in SEC play. Remember we talked about this with Connor Wegman during the offseason. And I told you guys, I said there are some people that got a first round grade on them. Their big knocks on him is that he can't stay healthy, and they need consistency because he just flashes. It's a flash, and then you never see more than the flash. You never see him consistently put it together for multiple games throughout a season. He's either flashed early on in non-conference, then he gets hurt, or he flashes early on, and then the next game he's inconsistent, right? You just can't see the baseline that you want from him. But let's assume that Connor Wigman now can develop a baseline. Let's just be glass half full here. If he develops a baseline, he was 18 of 22 for 276 yards and starts playing like a quarterback that some had during the offseason, Pro Football Focus and Matt Miller had projected as a first-round pick. If he's going to be that kind of guy, and let's assume that the familiarity now with that Colin Klein system, that he's now becoming more and more comfortable in that system because it's a new system. So we assume end of the year, they'll be making more plays in that system. They'll have more knowledge of it than they do at the beginning of the season. And maybe that offense is rolling. They average over 6.6 yards per carry. We know the defense is good. We've been saying that forever. Defense, I'm not shocked the defense had almost 45% havoc rate against Missouri and 6 sacks. Not surprising. They got dogs. They got ballers on defense. And Elko's a defensive coach. The question with the Aggies has always been, what's the offense going to look like? Jimbo Fisher had the offense stuck in the 20th century forever. Are they going to have a modernized offense? Because Colin Klein, can he modernize the offense? Do they have the weapons on the outside to even threaten a team like Texas, to win a shootout with a team like Texas? Is that possible? And now, at least based on what we saw versus Missouri, maybe they do have an offense, not that can hang with Texas, but they have an offense that can score enough points and they can play complementary football now with a defense that can lead the way. And if that's the case, I see why Longhorn fans are more anxious about that game, because the Aggies may present more of a formidable threat overall than Arkansas. And I will say this, Texas, I bet Sark, in terms of prioritizing those games, I bet Sark has spent more time on A&M than he probably has on Arkansas.
Yeah.
If you want to just ask me.
A little bit. I think he spent a little bit of time on Arkansas because he wants revenge for that last game. He went there. I think there's probably a little bit of Sark that's like, I just want it. Like that left a bad taste.
Oh, I get it.
Because that was a bad game.
Yeah,
but I'm with you.
Oh, yeah, it was.
I think he knows.
Worst game he's had. Yeah,
I think he knows which is important.
I think he knows that you don't want to. And now looking at it, hell, the Aggies 3-0 in SEC play. They'll be favored in every game left except for the Texas game. Aggies actually may be in more of a position to derail your SEC title hopes than anybody else. We shall see. But my point is, I get why I would say Arkansas or A&M. Either one would be fine with me. But yes, the Aggies, that is a bigger game this year, arguably, than your Texas OU game, which is your biggest game every year.
No, and hopefully there will be a little bit like, because once they get past the LSU game, they should have pretty decently smooth sailing. The Aggies should. If they beat LSU, it should be pretty smooth sailing. They don't have that many more challenging games on the schedule other than Texas. Hopefully that you get that Connor Wegman that gets a little bit more complacent, because that's another thing he had to deal with. His backup was against a wall that a lot of people didn't want him to come back in and start.
It's true.
A lot of people
Good
were
point.
like, "Cool, you're done. Like we're good.
Yeah.
We've moved on." So he had that fire to try and prove that he should be the starting quarterback again. And how long could that fire last? Now he's going to be pumped up for the Texas game because who isn't going to be pumped up for that game? But that fire of my job is on the line. Will that still be there in several weeks?
No, it's a good point. I didn't think about that, but you're right. Matter of fact, Eli Drinkowitz. There's some quotes from Eli Drinkowitz that suggest or imply that he didn't think Connor Wigman was going to play, and that there's some people that believe, some Missouri fans that believe that's how the team prepared, and it looked like they prepared for a different quarterback, and they were ill prepared or unprepared, if you will, for Connor Wigman playing. And that could have been, a Dane coaching mistake, an error in judgment for Eli Drinkowitz. This is what he said on Tuesday. He said, reads clearly become the focal point of what they're doing offensively. He said, you can tell, in my opinion, that offensive coordinator Klein is very comfortable with him as the quarterback. He said, I know on their depth chart, the other kid, Weigman, the starting quarterback, but I mean, that's just semantics, in my opinion. The guys read 3-0 as a starter. And whether he's listed as questionable or whatever, I don't see them going back. They went back. and I don't think his team was prepared for that. And so ultimately the Aggies had an upper hand. They had a big upper hand, I think, early on in that game because Missouri was playing catch up and maybe adjusting on the fly to a quarterback that they didn't game plan for. And maybe they should have spent some time game planning for both. That's why, as a coach, even though the other team's gonna, who the team's gonna start, due diligence forces you to devote practice time to it.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. We all thought Orgy was gonna play a lot more versus Michigan.
We did.
The Texas was like, nah, we got to prepare for both. We know we're wasting time, but we have to prepare for both because we go into that game and we only prepared for one and we make the wrong call. Man.
Yeah,
we could end up SOL. And I think that might have had something to do with the slow start for Electric. That's not the reason they got whipped the entire game. Right? He got out coached, he got out played. But the bad start for that game might have been because they thought, the other kid was going to start and Wigman ended up getting the start. So Marcel Reeves.
By the way, we also saw how happy is Miami that all these upsets happened. So no one's going to talk about how they almost got upset by Cal. They were really need a huge heroic comeback in the fourth quarter to be in that game. Like that is not going to withstand for as long as they just do every week now they're getting behind and having to come back.
It's helping Cam's Heisman.
It is, but
because it's giving him a lot of dramatic moments and Heisman moments, but you're right. It's not good for them as a team.
It's still not Janty who had another 196 and 3 touchdowns, something like that, and played first half.
Yeah, I don't know how you deny him the Heisman at this point. I think it's going to be, I think between him and Travis Hunter, I don't know how somebody else wins the Heisman other than those two.
Yeah.
Right now.
Janty had, he's 1,000 yards on the season already. He has 95 carries.
He's got
over 1,000. He's already 1,000-yard rusher.
He's going to easily get to 2,000. I mean, he's going to threaten Barry Sanders' record.
Yeah. They were starting to show those stats of being like comparing the two, but he sat in the second half. He didn't even play in the second half.
I know. He's going to threaten that record.
It is ridiculous what he's doing.
I wonder what team in the league's going to try to get Ashton Dingey. Are the Cowboys going to try? Are the Cowboys think he's that good? Or the Cowboys try to maneuver and get him?
I don't know. I mean, it does. Someone pointed it out. They're like, this is what happens when you take a video game and play it on the easiest level and turn all the sliders all the way down. That's what it looks like when he plays.
It's just, and I just want to play against like an elite defense because he is legit. I just want to see like how legit. I'm like, is he that legit where he can do that to damn near?
Well, I mean, if it keeps going, he's gonna eventually, right?
In the playoff, well, it looks like they'll have a chance to play in the playoffs.
I mean, if he keeps running for 300 yards a game himself.
Dude, yeah, he's on pace. He might be within, depending on how good, like 100 yards of Barry Sanders' record, because Barry Sanders rushed for 2,600 yards.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That makes no sense at all, man. That is just so I don't know how you deny a guy with those kind of numbers the Heisman. As long as his team has a winning record, I mean that's kind of some Ricky Williams, Barry Sanders type stuff. It's like I got to get a guy a Heisman.
No, it's historic. There's no one that's close. Like they were showing his stats compared to the last 5 running backs who won the Heisman, and he's basically double what all they're at right now.
So it's like we're past like, is his team going to be good? I'm like, his stats are so damn good. I don't know if you got to pay attention to the. As long as the team has a winning record,
Yeah.
I'm good because he's the reason they're winning. I don't know how good the O line is. I don't know if I need to know because he's doing some things on the football field. Like I said last week, I would drug test him, and that's the best compliment I can give the young man. Young man, I need to drug test you because you're doing stuff that makes me think you're doing PEDs. Like that's it. The only way I can rationalize what you're doing is you got to be PEDs. You got to be taking PEDs.
It doesn't, and even with PEDs, it doesn't make sense.
Exactly. PEDs. Like, there are people on PEDs that ain't doing what you're doing. Like I'm telling him and Travis Hunter, they're in my PED discussion. Like, let's test them. And that'd be a compliment to you, young men, because that's how good y'all, that's how dynamic and extraordinary the things they're doing are. That I'm thinking, okay, that's got to be helped by some type of performance enhancer. Because Travis Hunter's doing things we've never seen before either.
Yeah.
We've never seen anybody play full-time offense and full-time defense in a modern era of football. That's crazy.
In elite level.
And yes, and he's a first-round talent. Both of them, we never seen anything like that. So I don't know how if you want to skip over these two guys and give some quarterback on a good team the Heisman, even if it's Quinn, y'all know that's a bunch of bull. Yeah. Y'all know it's a bunch of bull. And y'all know that damn award is a
Rock it out at the worst time. We'll see if he's
All right, welcome back to the Rodcast. Time to get into some more Texas football conversation and Rod's rant of the day. I want to talk first. We'll talk about the Texans because we didn't get a chance to talk about the Texans and their big win over the Buffalo Bills yesterday. A couple of things that stood out to me for the Texans. I think number one, the Texans they continue to still have their third and long issues, but at least they're not as long as they once were. Going into that game, you were averaging 3rd and 9 yards to gain on average, which was the longest yards to gain on average on 3rd down in the league. In this game, you averaged 3rd and 7, was your average distance on 3rd downs. Not great, but not as bad as 3rd and 9 plus yards a game. And CJ Stroud continues to be fantastic on 3rd down. So you're getting better there. All right. I think just getting better, shows that there's some progress and maybe that they're addressing some of those issues. As long as they don't regress week after week. I think there's only so much you can do in 1 week to improve in that category. I don't expect a drastic leap, but they got to stay out of 3rd and longs and really longs. Also, the penalties. We talked about that, right? Penalties and pass protection were 2 issues that had been plaguing the offensive line. Well, in that game, at least in the first half, you had one of the cleanest games you've played all season long. 0 penalties, 0 sacks allowed in the first half by the Texans O-line. That's a really, really good sign that, maybe it didn't last 4 quarters, but for 2 quarters, you were able to play ideal football on your offensive line with penalties and sacks allowed. And that's the best half of football the O-line's played all season, going up against that Buffalo Bills defense. And you brought this up, Patrick. I mean, it didn't last all game long, but that might be the best half of football we've seen the team play potentially.
100%.
That's the O-line.
100. I mean, that was, you had no penalties. You had no turnovers. You had no sacks.
Yeah.
I mean, everything was going right for you in that first half, and you're able to take the lead. And Nico Collins gets a touchdown, but he has to leave with the injury. So that second half, I get you're going to be a little down with no Joe Mixon, no Nico Collins. That's 2 of your big offensive weapons. But you can't have that stupid Dalton Schultz penalty. Like, why is Dalton Schultz getting a 15-yard penalty after a play? For taunting, and why are you getting, like, there was just some of those that were drive killers. And if you go look at just the chart of the drives, first half to second half, it felt like first half they made the one mistake of they went for it on 4th down and tried to run it up the middle. And other than that, it was a pretty well called first half. They were able to get a little bit of penetration. They used Ogunbowale really well in the passing game. We're able to get him going a little bit at points. Everything seemed to be going good. In that second half, it just felt like they went in and celebrated a little too early. And again, it was the discipline of, okay, you came out disciplined, which is great. But then we get to the second half and we're up on the Bills and you feel like you did it and you just move on. And you have to go play 48 minutes you got to play 60 minutes. You got to play the full game. And they just didn't want to play. They played it. Sorry, I said 40, but I'm in basketball mode. But by the way, did you get that one from the ref too? There was a ref call early in that game when Josh Allen gets the ball poked out, but he's out of bounds, and the ref comes out and says he was out of bounds when he fumbled when he lost the basketball.
Oh no! Did he?
Yes, the ref said when he lost the basketball, and it was like,
so he's pulling double duty, huh?
Apparently, they were saying that he's a basketball coach for his kids.
There you go. That's interesting, though. I did not hear that.
Yeah, cool. It was an interesting one. But I'm in the same mindset. I'm already in basketball mode. Ready to watch my Spurs tonight. But that being said, but it was a really good first half, and then they started to have their problems creep back up on them in the second half. Even that at the end of the game, the missed that intentional grounding, which by the way, the way that rule is written kind of sucks. I don't like that if you throw a ball within 20 yards of a wide receiver, that they'll let you get out of it. They'll be like, oh, the ball bounced 15 yards in front of him, but we'll say he was over there. But then Dalton Schultz is clearly running to the ball and then cuts back. And if you watch the play, when CJ Stroud throws it, there's supposed to be a wide receiver there.
Yeah.
And then he cuts back and they're like, no, I get they called it by the rule, but the rule is bogus in that sense. But
no, I'm with you on that. No, I agree. But that wasn't a CJ Stroud to me. That wasn't a CJ Stroud mental error. If that's what some people are thinking.
No, and that was a just either miscommunication where the play could go either way, or Dalton Schultz just had a mind fart, a brain fart in there. But the way they played in that first half, that's the game film you get to watch and sit down with your guys and go, this is what we're capable of. This is a team that can go compete in the playoffs. And the second half is a team that will win the AFC South because it's really bad.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna win the AFC South no matter what, right? They can continue to play lackluster football. They're gonna win the AFC South. But yeah, can you play and beat? Can you play on the same level and beat Kansas City? I'm trying to think of who else in the AFC now is playing at a high level. I guess Baltimore is now turning things around.
Baltimore,
the AFC actually right now is. I mean, the Texans are right there. They are right there behind Kansas City, pretty much. I mean, they're 4-1. It just doesn't look very pretty.
No, yeah, but
Kansas City's undefeated right now does not look pretty either. They are playing ugly football. They're winning ugly. That's the key to what Kansas City's doing. And they know how to win ugly, and they believe they'll flip the switch at any time and they can win how they want to win. And I believe it too, because that's why they're defending Super Bowl champions, back-to-back Super Bowl champions. But yeah, right now the Texans, I know that we don't necessarily like the way they're winning because we don't think they're playing to a standard. It's some ugly, self-inflicted wounds, but it's clunky. But they're right there.
And I believe too, once you get Joe Mixon back, that changes a lot because then it gives you a real running back once again. You made that trade in the offseason for it, and then he just gets hurt in week 1 or week 2, and you've been dealing with it ever since. I think when you watch that first half, though, you go, think that's a team. And the good part about it is you are really early in the season. So this is something D'Amico Ryans, when he said, we've got it fixed. It's not fixed, but you're making progress on it, which is good.
He's addressing it.
You're making progress. And this is the first half is show you guys can do it. You can play a clean half, but let's do this for the entire game.
Yeah, that team that played in the first half, that's the team that can play with Kansas City for 4 quarters.
Yes.
I ain't saying you're gonna beat them. I ain't saying you're gonna beat them. I'm just saying that team in the first half, that's the team that people thought would challenge Kansas City. The team that we've seen so far this season for most of the games cannot challenge Kansas City. But that first half versus Buffalo, that's the kind of football that potentially could challenge Kansas City.
When you saw they started out and James Cook looked like he was just going to walk right over the Texans.
Yeah, they came out in that 6-0 line pack. They came out with 6-0 linemen trying to challenge the Texans, and the Texans bowled their back.
And that first drive, it looked like they were going to go over it, and they fixed everything and got it working right. And then that 30% for Josh Allen, that is you got to put that up somewhere and celebrate that win as a team. To hold Josh Allen, who's going into this week an MVP candidate, one of the top MVP candidates, and
they shut him out. And a lot of it was this is Buffalo, right? This is why their recipe is not going to work. They can't go through the season and hope that their number 1 wide receiver was named Khalil Shakir.
Yes,
and he's a good player, but they need more weapons for Josh Allen. And it was fine through the first half of the season when they thought, oh man, we can distribute the football around, and there is no true number 1 wide receiver among this group. Whoever is open, that's who gets the ball. And it's like, yeah, that's in theory, it makes a lot of sense. It's like, oh, everybody is the number 1 wide receiver, depending on who's open. But you do need a guy with gravity, and they don't have that. And when the Texans didn't have to worry about a number 1 wide receiver, look at what they were able to do to them.
Yeah.
To Buffalo.
And Keon Coleman had that big play because it was a missed tackle.
He did.
But
that was really the only. That was it. I mean, he had 131 yards, 131 yards passing total, and I believe most of them came on that 1 touchdown to Keon Coleman.
Yeah,
that was like 40 something yards of his 131 yards came on just 1 play to Keon Coleman. So I think they got some more issues. This is one of the best defenses I think they got some bigger issues now in Buffalo, potentially, and they got to figure that out. But you're right, man. That was the lowest completion percentage for a quarterback with at least 30 passing attempts in the last 30 years. So we have not seen a quarterback look that inept throwing that much in the last 30 years. And that, you said Josh Allen, I don't know if there is a and more obvious front runner for MVP going into that game, and they made him look subpar. So you got to give the Texans a lot of credit. Great game plan by D'Amico to limit Buffalo, but I think it's easy because I don't think Buffalo has any threats in the receiving game. I don't think they have any threats in their receiving core, really. That could come back to haunt them. But either way, Texans played great. Speaking of receiving cores, we don't know how long Nico Collins is going to be out. He's the NFL's leading receiver, 567 yards, and he looked – I didn't even think he could open up like that on the play where he actually hurt his hamstring on that touchdown catch. But, man, he just ran right by the DBs. I mean, like a racehorse. He just ran right by. It wasn't he put a move on him. He didn't give him a speed cut. He just ran straight up the field and, like, just straight speed and just outran the DBs. And they threw it deep. It was actually, I want to say it might be the longest pass we've seen from C.J. Stroud in terms of, like, air yards. I think he had, like, 60 air yards on it. I mean, it was a beautiful throw from C.J. Stroud. But without Nico Collins, that is also something Texans fans got to worry about because hamstrings are weird. You don't want to rush a hamstring. You got to let a hamstring completely heal. And you need Nico for the stretch run. So you got the Patriots coming up next. If it's a hamstring, I don't know if I'd play him versus the Patriots. That sounds arrogant and cocky, but
no, especially not if Tank Dell's back. And if you get Joe Mixon back. And Tank Dell played in this game. Joe Mixon, I feel like you still have enough weapons. If all those guys
are number one now, he just slides in that number one role. Right? Yeah, he had 82 receiving yards, which was the game high, and I'm sure he liked that. That was his revenge game against his old team. But I would sit Nico if it's a hamstring injury. I wouldn't risk it. He didn't go back in the game. I wouldn't risk him. Going back and re-injuring because of a hamstring. Once you re-injure a hamstring, you're just gonna prolong the recovery even more.
Yeah.
If you the initial injury, if you get that one right in terms of the recovery and the rehab. And usually it's not something that'll keep you out, longer than 3 weeks or a month. But you re-injure that thing, it could linger all season long. And Nate never gets back to be 100%. And now the guy is on his way to being the leading receiver in the league. I think missing one game, it may draw him back to the pack a little, but I still think he'll be – I think he was leading the NFL receiving by like 100 yards anyway. He had a hell of a lead going into this week. So I think that's your biggest concern if you're the Texans. How do we replicate the first half, as Patrick was talking about, and how do we approach the Nico Collins situation?
Yeah, the good part is it didn't look like a terrible hamstring injury. It looked
like a tweak.
Yeah, so it's something that probably isn't going to be super long term, but at the same part, I'm with you. If you don't need to play him against the Patriots, you have those other weapons. There's no sense rushing him back at that point.
No, man. Hammies are weird. I wouldn't mess with it.
And the problem is, he's a number one guy too, where you're like, well, we're gonna play him, we're gonna use him. So if he's there, he's getting 10 targets. So it's not something where you can really put him in and not use him in that. The wide receiver is not one of those positions where you can kind of lightly use him. So I think that it's probably best to just not tempt yourself.
Yep, I agree. And that's obviously that's gonna hurt the offense a little bit because you lose one of your weapons, but I think Stephon Diggs is more than up to the task, and I think Tank Dell will look pretty good too. So I wouldn't play him versus the Patriots, but we'll give you an update as soon as we get one about Nico Collins' hamstring. Also, the Texans in this game, their second half woes came back to haunt them, as Patrick mentioned. Great first half, but not a good second half. Their second half scoring is going to be an issue.
Yeah.
They entered the game averaging just 8.5 points in the second half on the season, and they scored 6 on Sunday. So that's going to be another issue to watch them. Third downs, that's something they got to fix. They also got to fix their second half scoring. And the second half scoring, like I said, that's if you're going up against Kansas City and you're going up against, the Baltimore and the best teams in the AFC, it's going to come down to being a fourth quarter game. And shout out to C.J. Stroud, another game-winning drive, 2 back-to-back game-winning drives in this last 2 weeks for C.J. Stroud. He's been playing at a really
I'm not going to give him credit for that drive till we kick the field goal. He threw one pass. It was a 2-yard pass.
It's a game-winning drive. What are you talking about?
Right, because he did the drive the play before. The drive he made the second last series was a game-winning drive, and then they get the intentional grounding. I still get it, but it was one play.
Still counts, man.
I know you don't like it, but it still
counts as C.J. Stroud, quarterback in a game-winning drive.
Yeah,
but what do you? I mean, what is the minimum pass limit for a quarterback on the drive to be a game-winning drive?
I don't know, 10 yards, a first down.
You know what I mean? I don't know if there is
not a dump off pass.
Still though, I mean, I'm just giving you the stats. All right, I'm giving you the facts. The facts are it was a game-winning drive.
I get it.
Quarterback the game-winning drive.
I'll say because if you combine it with the last one, they get up and then get the field position that then the defense holds, and that field position allows a Robert Woods return that puts him in really good field position. So in that sense, as a whole, what he did in the final 2 minutes was very important. But that last drive was two plays. It was a dump off because nothing was open, timeout, kick a field goal.
Hey, like I said, you still get when you're the quarterback, you get all the girls, you get all the grief. You get all the girls too, man. You get all the credit. Hey, that's just part of it. That's like you said, when they lose, they probably get too much blame for when they lose.
That's true.
When they win, they
if he missed a field goal and it goes to overtime in the back, he couldn't orchestrate a game-winning drive. You're like,
that's exactly what they say.
I have 7 seconds.
I did all I could. It's like, nope, he's not clutch. He doesn't have a clutch gene. That's what they'll throw it out about him. But yeah, I think for the Texans though, one other thing that I want to mention, they still got to figure out who they are on early downs. Still struggling a little bit on early downs for the Texans. I saw this. They are second in EPA per play on 3rd and 4th down. I mean, actually second in the NFL. So, and by the way, 3rd downs, they're averaging 3rd and long. So they're really good. They're 31st in EPA per play on 1st and 2nd down. So they're among the worst in the NFL on 1st and 2nd down in terms of overall efficiency, among the best in the NFL overall efficiency on 3rd and 4th down. That can't be the case. They got to spread that out just a little bit more. And I think that should be the goal for them. Their early down rush success rate without Joe Mixon, with Joe Mixon, it was 50%, but without Joe Mixon, 24% in week 2. Week 3, 18%, 25% in week 4, 21% in week 5. So they got to get better running the ball on early downs, more efficient with their early downs, period. The easy solution is give it to CJ Stroud, just let him handle it. But they got to get better in the run game on early downs, and Joe Mixon's health is probably going to be the biggest factor in determining how much they improve there and how quickly they improve there. All right, let's talk a little bit of the Longhorns while we got some time here, talking about their game coming up versus the Oklahoma Sooners. Big game for the Longhorns because it is their rival, but also coming off a bye week, second game in the SEC. And also the Longhorns are heavy favorites. Now, every book's a little different. There is a book out there, I believe, that had him as a double-digit favorite, but still, most books have him as an 8, 7, or an 8-point favorite in this contest. Looking at it, I think the biggest factor, and I threw this out there earlier, at least the biggest advantage for the Longhorns in this matchup right now has to be Quinn and Quinn's experience, period. Quinn's experience trumps, I think, a lot of other potential advantages Texas has because since 1990, quarterbacks with more experience in the Cotton Bowl, 16-5-1. Now, it does include last year where Dylan Gabriel had less experience than Quinn, ended up winning the game. So, I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but that's a pretty lopsided trend that the quarterback with more experience, 16-5-1 in the Texas OU game since 1990. And for Quinn, that helps him deal with the adversity that he's going to face. I mean, think about it. Every time he's played in this game, he's faced a little bit of adversity, right? He had the first game the first time he played Alabama, he was coming off. Sorry, first time he played Oklahoma, he was coming off of an injury that he got in that Alabama game. In the second year, he had that struggle at the beginning of the game. He had interceptions at the beginning of the game. So he had a slow start and then was able to finish strong in the last 3 quarters of that matchup against Oklahoma. Still lost that game, but was able to bounce back and didn't, go into a spiral, didn't go into quicksand, as I call it, right? Still was able to fight back and able to bring his team within a drive of winning that game against the Sooners. That type of experience, those lessons you learn that you can only learn in the Texas OU game, I think are going to help Quinn. And Hawkins, the quarterback that's going to start for Oklahoma, first time that he's going to start the Texas OU game, I think there are some growing pains you got to go through. And I think a quarterback with experience in this specific, very unique environment understands the momentum swings and how drastic they are. They understand, how early on in the game, you kind of let things settle And you may start off a little shaky. You may start off making some mistakes early, but you also have to allow your nerves to settle. And I think that happened to Quinn early on in that contest last game, where he had to allow last game versus Oklahoma. We had to allow his nerves to settle just a little bit. And then once they did, he played great. So I think that advantage for Texas, having the quarterback with the experience, and not only that, he understands the magnitude of this game, right? He understands the momentum shifts and how they can be monopolized. He also has the experience with his coach. I think that is going to play his role. Now, that's not necessarily relevant to the stat itself, but Sark and Quinn have been together for 3 years in that same system. The Sooners don't have that advantage. They don't have coaching continuity with the scheme continuity and this consistency in the scheme. Jeff Lebby was there last year, and now you got Seth Luttrell as the OC. Jackson Arnold was the starting quarterback earlier this year. Now you got Hawkins in there starting quarterback. So there's a lot of turnover with them. With Quinn and Sark, yeah, you had Arch in there to start a couple of games because of injury, but that's a group that's been able to establish, the culture of communication, establish trust with each other, the compatibility between Sark and Quinn. That's going to play a huge role in this contest. So you got continuity. First of all, you got experience with the quarterback position. You got that advantage, but the continuity between quarterback and play caller, you have the continuity on the O-line. Texas has the O-line advantage because they got more experienced guys on the O-line and a more experienced offensive line. I'll also throw out there, I think Texas has better skill position guys on offense too. Now, I like the Oklahoma wide receivers, but I'll admit they've been a mash unit for most of the season, and Texas wide receiver room is as deep as we've seen it, and knock on wood, haven't dealt with any serious injuries at the wide receiver position. Running back for Texas, I guess it could be a push between their running backs and Texas running backs just because of the injuries that Texas has, but Texas has overwhelmingly almost every advantage in the matchup with Oklahoma offense versus, offense compared to offense. Defensively, I think Texas has a better overall defense, but I'll admit, I don't know if Texas is as havoc-minded and make as many splash plays as the Oklahoma defense. They're top 5 in takeaways. They're top 10 in sacks. They're top 15 in tackles for loss. That's just how that's what they feed off of. And if Texas can protect the passer and don't allow a lot of sacks and tackles for loss and negative plays, and protect the football, and don't give up a lot of turnovers and they don't give a lot of takeaways, I think Texas will win this game comfortably against Oklahoma. But the Kim Kardashian, Nicki Minaj, Whitney Houston, Cardi B sides, making the sound sides. But if they do have some turnovers and they do have self-inflicted wounds and they allow some negative plays, that Oklahoma defense will keep it close in the fourth quarter. They can do that because I think they're going to steal that Mississippi State game plan. Why wouldn't you? You got veer and shoot principles and veer and shoot DNA. Your quarterback can do what their quarterbacks did, sprinkle in some QB running game. You should have as good, if not better, wide receivers, even if yours is a mash unit against them and be able to chunk it deep, even because Mississippi State got behind Texas a little bit. Oklahoma will try to do some of that. I just think if Mississippi State could keep it close for 3 quarters at home against Texas, on the road against Texas, I think Oklahoma's going to take that game plan. I wouldn't doubt if Jeff Lebby and Brent Venables already texting about it right now, or I've been texting and during the bye week about it. All right, we come back. We'll wrap it up, put it in the oven, and we'll play Who Said That on the other side right here on the Rodcast, featuring Patrick Davis on Lifetime of the Horn. Rod Babers coming back on the Horn. All right, welcome back to the Rodcast. It is a Smooth Soul Monday. That's when Patrick plays jams intended to soothe the tortured soul of sports fans who might have had a really rough weekend. So we appreciate him hooking us up with a Smooth Soul Monday. Also, he comes up with the topic for the big fat poll of the day. You can go check that out on Twitter. Right now, it's already posted. The big fat poll of the day is simple. Which team with a top 10 upset still on Texas' schedule this season worries you the most? And 65% of you surveyed said the Aggies, the Texas A&M Aggies, worry you the most out of those teams who have a top 10 win, upset win on their record. Arkansas, second in that voting at 16%. All right, time to get to who said that. That's when Patrick plays pieces of audio from the sports world, sometimes beyond the sports world, and based on the context clues or familiarity of the voice, you have to identify or recall who said that.
Bro, I mean, it was miraculous. I mean, JT literally sprained his nuts. Oh, excuse me, sorry, sprained his nuts to play before it comes back, makes the game winner. Unbelievable. Extended play. I mean, that's guys playing above the 2.3. Dudes emptying the clip. I mean, it was great stuff.
All right, there you go. That's Tyler Smith, the offensive lineman for the Cowboys, describing the effort from Jalen Tolbert there, the testicular fortitude it took for him to score the winning touchdown, suffering from a testicular contusion on the play before. There you go. There you go. That summed up the Cowboys, I think, performance there perfectly. They just showed a lot of fortitude, a lot of you know what.
Yeah, man, it's a sad day when that adrenaline wears off after that game for Tolbert.
Oh yeah, he's gonna feel it. Oh, right now it's probably swollen. Not gonna lie, it's probably swollen.
Yeah, no, that was you get the game-winning catch, and you're just like adrenaline's pumping, and you're probably good until you're like maybe in the bus ride back to the hotel.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I don't know. Honestly, it probably was hurting a little bit right after. Because
I think it's hurting a little bit.
I would say in the shower it probably started. He probably was like, "Oh, this is feeling a little weird." Oh man. And I bet by the time, like at night when I bet he might have been icing. He might put some ice on them.
Oh yeah,
had to ice them down. And that, by the way, that is not comfortable.
No,
that is also very, very uncomfortable. At to ice down your family jewels. You don't want to do that either.
Listen, as someone who knows what the temperature of a pool is when it's cold to get into, like 75 degrees in a pool, you don't want to get in.
That's too cold. Now imagine putting ice like
75 degrees. You're like, ooh, too cold on. No,
yeah, man. No. Oh no, it's going. Yeah, trust me, he's gonna pay the price for it. But all Cowboys fans, y'all all should be grateful because my man Jalen Tolbert, man, a lot of testicular fortitude for him to show up the way he did. All right, thanks for showing up the way you did, Patrick. All the technical difficulties and all kind of stuff and madness, but the show must go on. And Patrick, you're the reason that this show went on because it wouldn't happen without you. But you're the real MVP. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you guys out there for listening and for watching. Remember, the revolution will not be televised. We'll be talking about it right here on the Rodcast. We love you guys. We mean that. Take care of yourselves, but more importantly, take care of each other. Until next time, hook 'em and peace.